When the fat old man thought about how he had easily earned 250,000 high-grade spirit stones today, he was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He generously arranged for Yun Chujio to have a room on the second floor facing the street. Yun Chujio returned to her room to wash up. Just as she was about to take out Prime Minister Sima's voice transmission talisman to study the countermeasures, she heard a commotion on the street outside. Yun Chujio opened the window and looked outside through a crack. She saw many soldiers checking on passers-by and even entering various shops to search. Yun Chujio's heart sank. From the looks of it, it was obvious that she was determined to find her. Although she had disguised her appearance and spiritual power, she did not have an identity document. After checking, she would definitely be exposed. Although that fat old man was greedy, he would definitely hand her over under threat. Moreover, the fat old man was not the only person in this inn. Even if the fat old man wanted to protect her, someone might report her. What should she do? Yun Chujio's forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The great void mirror was still in hibernation. Otherwise she could go in and hide. Just as Yun Chujio was hopping around anxiously, the little black bird in the spiritual beast pouch said, "Master, why don't you take a rejuvenation pill? After you turn into a child, naturally no one will suspect you." Xiao Hanyo said with a smile. Yun Chujio felt that this method was feasible. It was normal for a young child's family not to give her an identity document. Moreover, no one would associate a child like her with the little girl from before. However, the gigolo only gave her an antidote last time. Although she already knew the prescription for the Guai Chao, she did not have the few herbs inside, so she had not refined the antidote. If she ate the rejuvenation pill, she would probably have to spend some effort to find the missing herbs. Should she take the rejuvenation pill or not? Yun Chujio saw through the crack in the window that a few people without identity documents were taken away. There were even some who resisted and were killed immediately. Without hesitation, she changed into a set of clothes and swallowed a rejuvenation pill. At this moment, the fat old man's forehead was also covered in sweat. He felt that he had most likely picked up a big trouble. He originally thought that it was just a little girl without identity documents. Who would have thought that she was actually an important criminal of the imperial court? If the person was found in his shop, he would also be implicated. The fat old man gritted his teeth. If it really did not work out, he could only bleed a little. Nothing was more important than his old life. When the time came, he would say that he deliberately left her in the inn in order to stabilize her and was preparing to report her. Right, that was what he was going to do. Just as the fat old man made up his mind and was about to go out to report and make contributions, the hem of his clothes was gently tugged by someone. The fat old man looked down and saw a pretty girl doll looking up at him. Her eyes were curved like a crescent moon. The fat old man was stunned. Where did this little girl come from? She was probably a customer's child. How careless. Such a pretty little girl could easily be abducted by human traffickers. "Grandpa, this is the note that sister asked me to give you." The little girl handed a note to the fat old man. The fat old man opened the note in confusion and saw a line of words written on it. "I'm leaving. This is the child that I abducted. Do as you see fit. Take the 250,000 high-grade spirit stones as your compensation." The fat old man's heart was like a dog that was crying. For a moment he did not know what to feel. The fat old man was stunned for a moment. On second thought, it was a good thing that the scourge had left so that he would not be implicated. Otherwise, even if he reported it, he might get into trouble. However, what about this little girl? The fat old man lowered his head and looked at the little girl. Was this really the child that the girl had abducted? That was not right. When that little girl came in, she was clearly alone. When did this child come in? The fat old man thought about it again. This little girl was small. Perhaps he didn't notice when she came in? The fat old man bent down and asked little Nine kindly, "Little girl, when did you come in? You call that little girl sister? Is she really your sister?" Little Nine had an innocent and romantic look on her face. "I just came in. Sister bought me candy to eat. I like sister." When the fat old man heard this, he thought for a while. He guessed that the smelly girl had used candy to trick this little girl. She was really wicked. "Little doll, where do you come from? Grandpa will send you home." Little Nine bit her finger and looked at the fat old man blankly. "My house is a very, very big yard. There are many, many rooms inside. Sob, sob, I want my mother, sob, I want my father." The fat old man immediately felt numb. Although he was greedy for money, when such a delicate little girl cried, it was simply heartbreaking. Moreover, he heard little Nine say that there were many, many yards in the house. That was definitely a rich family. If he sent the little girl back, he might receive a great reward. When the fat old man thought of this, his eyes flashed with a bright light. This was a good opportunity to make a fortune. The fat old man revealed an amiable smile and comforted, "Little child, Grandpa will help you find a home. Come, Grandpa will give you candy to eat." When little Nine ate the candy, she immediately stopped crying and said with a smile, "Grandpa is really a good person. Grandpa will make a fortune." The fat old man immediately smiled so much that he could not close his mouth. This little girl really knew how to talk. Just as the fat old man was laughing and teasing little Nine, there was a commotion outside. The fat old man's heart tightened, but when he remembered that the little girl had already escaped and was dead without any evidence, the government could not do anything to him. Therefore he carried little Nine out of the inner room. Sure enough, there were soldiers interrogating the employees. The employees in the shop were all trained by the fat old man. Moreover, if something happened to the fat old man, they would not be able to recover. Therefore they answered very carefully and did not say anything. The fat old man saw that the leader was an acquaintance and said with a smile, "Boss Lee, why are you free today? What happened?" The little leader nodded to the fat old man. "The higher-ups asked to search a little girl. Every house must be searched. This is a routine matter. Boss Zhang don't mind." "What are you talking about? We are people of Starry Night City, so we naturally have to cooperate with the government. You can search as much as you want. This is a registered customer. You can check it." As the fat old man spoke, he handed the guest registration book to the little leader. The little leader took the book and looked curiously at the little girl behind the fat old man. He asked, "Boss Zhang, is this little girl your granddaughter?" The fat old man smiled and said, "She's the child of a distant relative. She asked me to take care of her for a few days. I'll send her back in a few days." The little leader praised her a few times and did not ask any more questions. Then he led the soldiers and began to search the guest room. The fat old man was still a little nervous. He did not know if that smelly girl had really left. If she had not left, he would be in big trouble. Fortunately, the soldiers who were searching quickly came back, indicating that they did not find any suspicious people. Only then did the fat old man's heart relax. He secretly gave the little leader some spirit stones, and the little leader left with his men. Seeing that the situation had calmed down, the fat old man looked at little Nine, who was eating candy, and remembered something. He asked, "Little doll, tell Grandpa, is your home in Starry Night City?" Little Nine's eyes twinkled. Little Nine's home is very, very far away. There's a lot of money at home. Woo-woo, I want my mother, I want my father. When the fat old man saw that little Nine would cry at the mention of home, he had no choice but to comfort her again. He thought to himself, looks like this little doll's home isn't in Starry Night City. When he entered the city previously, he didn't see this little guy either. Perhaps that smelly girl hid this little guy in someone's car and snuck into the city? Could really be like this. Otherwise, that smelly girl wouldn't have left for a period of time. She probably went to look for this little kid during that period of time. It had to be said that the fat old man's imagination was really strong. He helped He Xingjiu find all the loopholes, but he actually didn't suspect a thing. Instead, he wanted to find out where little Nine's home was by every means possible. He wanted to make a fortune. A trace of craftiness flashed in Ziogeus' eyes. This round was over. At this time, the sky had already darkened. The fat old man looked at Xiaojiu. Such a little doll probably needed someone to take care of it. He planned to hire a maid to take care of Xiaojiu. Of course, Xiaojiu did not want a maid to be in the way, so she said softly, "Grandpa, I can wash my face and comb my hair. I can also sleep. Don't spend money to hire people." Although the fat old man didn't believe that such a small person could take care of herself, he was still very happy to save some money. During dinner, the fat old man saw that Yun Chuzhou was indeed eating well and was very obedient, so he gave up the idea of finding someone to take care of Xiao Xiaojiu. The fat old man arranged for Xiao Xiaojiu to be in a room in the backyard, next to his room. If anything happened, he would be the first to know. This was a golden baby, so nothing could go wrong. Little Nine saw the fat old man looking at her like he was looking at a spirit stone, and she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. In fact, people who were greedy for money were quite cute because once they caught their weakness, it was simply too easy to fool them. Little Nine stood on the small stool and washed up for a while, then lay on the bed to think about her next step. Those herbs that were used to refine the antidote would probably take a lot of effort to find. With her small body, she naturally couldn't do it, so she could only let Yun Jichen and Prime Minister Sima help her find it. She took out the voice transmission talisman and was about to send it to Prime Minister Sima when her heart skipped a beat. Why not ask the gigolo if he still had the antidote? If he still had it, he wouldn't need to trouble Prime Minister Sima to collect the herbs. Moreover, once the gigolo came, he could easily bring her out of here. Yun Chujio thought of this and took out D. Biming's voice transmission talisman. She made a noise and said that if D. Biming had the antidote, he would send one over to her. If he didn't have the antidote, he could also help her collect all the herbs. To be honest, Yun Chujio was a little nervous. The gigolo was no different from an ice sculpture now. She didn't know if he would care about her life or death. After a while, D. Biming didn't reply. Although Hei Shinjio was mentally prepared, she still felt stifled. Hei Shinjio did not sleep well these days, so she fell asleep quickly even though she was frustrated. The next morning, Hei Shinjio finally received D. Biming's reply. There were only 2 dry words. Wait? Yun Chujio pursed her lips. Was he playing with her? This guy did not ask much. He just told her to wait. The fat old man would ask Yun Chujio some questions from time to time. He just wanted to know where her home was so that he could send her back. Yun Chujio's heart skipped a beat. Fuck. She was so stupid. Wasn't this a ready-made person that could be used? Why didn't she remember? She could totally make up that she was the child of a big family in the East Phoenix country. As long as she left the Star Sun country, she could meet up with Prime Minister Sima and the others. Just when Hei Shinjio was vexed, she heard the fat old man muttering to himself, I wonder where this little girl is from. As long as she is not from the East Phoenix country, it will be fine. Little Nine blinked her eyes and asked curiously, Grandpa, what did you say? Why is it fine as long as she is not from the East Phoenix country? The fat old man was already used to the little girl's sometimes smart and sometimes cute appearance. Therefore, he was not surprised that she would ask such a question. He said in a low voice, the borders of our Star Sun country and East Phoenix country are tightly sealed. It is impossible to pass through without a document issued by the government. Moreover, I heard that no one is allowed to enter or leave these days. The fat old man could not help but laugh when he said this. He had really lost his mind. Why was he talking about this with a 3 or 4-year-old child? Yun Chujio's heart was shocked. Why did Star Sun country seal the borders for no reason? Could it be that they had a plot? No, she had to remind Prime Minister Sima. Therefore, Yun Chujio took the time to send a voice transmission talisman to Prime Minister Sima to remind him to pay attention to the Star Sun Kingdom's movements. On this day, the fat old man was checking the accounts while little Nine was sitting on the chair with a candy ball in her mouth. She was swaying her calves leisurely. At this moment, the originally noisy room quieted down. Everyone looked at the white-clothed man who walked in from the door. With just a glance, everyone lowered their heads and did not dare to look at the man who looked like a god. The powerful pressure made it difficult for them to breathe. The fat old man was slightly better than the others. Just as he was about to brace himself and ask the man in white if he was staying in the hotel, little Nine jumped down from the chair and ran over. Daddy. Daddy. You're finally here to pick up little Nine. A certain someone, little Nine hugged a certain someone's thigh and refused to let go. Needless to say, from her current point of view, the pretty boy was even more handsome. He was so handsome that it was almost unbearable to look at. She really had good taste. She had booked this monster early on. Putting everything else aside, their little monkey would definitely look very good in the future. Just as little Nine was thinking happily, she heard a cold and piercing voice coming from above her head. Let go. Little Nine pursed her lips, as if a basin of ice water was poured on the top of her head. Damn it, she almost forgot that this person was a bastard who had no emotions. Little Nine had no choice but to let go of her claws and looked at a certain venerable pitifully. A certain venerable looked deeply at little Nine and said coldly, Daddy? Little Nine bit her finger and said pitifully, Daddy, I won't make you angry in the future. Don't abandon me. Although the people outside the shop were a little afraid of a certain venerable's imposing manner, when they saw the pitiful little girl, they immediately looked at a certain venerable with disapproval. The spectators were discussing among themselves. Look at his looks. He actually had the heart to throw away his own daughter. What a scum. That's right. That little girl is as pretty as jade. If she was my daughter, I would definitely cherish her like a treasure. To have met such a scum of the father, that little girl must have suffered a lot. That little girl just tugged at his clothes and he even made her let go. What kind of person is this? He's simply too cold and heartless. When little Nine heard everyone's discussion, she was laughing in her heart. Alright, she was only so good for nothing. It was also good to tease this gigolo to vent her anger. The fat old man also looked at D. Biming with disapproval. This person seemed to be quite rich, but with this attitude towards the little girl, he probably wouldn't give him much money. He was really unlucky. A certain venerable's face was calm. He lowered his head to look at the pitiful little nine and said coldly, "Let's go." After saying that, a certain venerable took the lead to leave the inn. Little nine chased after him with her short legs and shouted, "Daddy hug! Daddy hug!" A certain venerable acted as if he didn't hear her and didn't even turn his head. The onlookers couldn't stand it anymore and started to criticize, "How can you be a father? Your daughter is so young, yet you don't even hug her. Could she be a stepfather? Your daughter is so cute, yet you treat her this way. If you don't want to give her to me, I just happen to want such an ice-cold and cute daughter." A certain someone remained indifferent and continued to walk forward. He just needed to send this troublemaker back to East Phoenix country safely. He wasn't interested in anything else. At this moment he heard a loud sound behind him, followed by the little girl's heart-wrenching cries, "Woo, Daddy is a bad person. Daddy won't hug me, Daddy doesn't love me anymore." This time, the surrounding spectators were filled with righteous indignation. If it wasn't for a certain someone's aura being too strong, these people would have already gone up to beat him up. A certain someone frowned and finally turned around. He saw the little person sitting on the ground with tears streaming down her face. She was crying pitifully. A certain someone hesitated for a moment. He looked at little nine and said coldly, "Come here." Little nine blinked her eyes and ran to a certain person's side with her short legs. Then she stretched out her two small arms and said softly, "Daddy hug?" The certain person's pupils shrank. Looking at the dust on little nine's body, he said coldly, "Cleaning spell?" Little nine pursed her lips but still used the cleaning spell. She said pitifully, "Daddy, can I hug you now?" A certain man expressionlessly stretched out his long arm and carried little nine up. When he turned around and was about to leave, the fat old man finally mustered up his courage and said, "Young master, this old man has taken in your daughter for a few days, and the expenses are not small either. What do you think?" The fat old man did not want to be so explicit in asking for money, but he finally understood that this man had no intention of giving him any money. That little girl had even forgotten about him, her savior. Once she had a father, he could only shamelessly ask for the reward himself. A certain elder didn't even look at the fat old man as he walked forward. Little nine was lying on a certain elder's shoulder. She waved her chubby little claws at the fat old man. "Grandfather, didn't Big Sister give you 250,000 high-grade spirit stones? Or even?" The fat old man looked at little nine's fox-like eyes and was so angry that he gritted his teeth. Could it be that this little girl wasn't abducted by that smelly girl? Chapter 34-46. Feeding the dog with emotion. Although the fat old man was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood, he didn't dare to continue chasing after her. If that little girl said anything extraordinary, he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. The fat old man did some calculations. These days he had only eaten some food. Previously, that smelly girl had given him 250,000 high-grade spirit stones. No matter how he looked at it, he had already made a huge profit. Thinking about it, the fat old man did not hold his anger anymore. He glared at little nine, then turned around and left. Little nine curled her lips and pondered in her heart. She did not know how the pretty boy had entered the city. Didn't Starry Night City want to check the identity document? A certain person carried little nine and quickly arrived at the city gate. Not only did the people guarding the city not stop them, but they also bowed respectfully. Yunchujio was very curious. After walking for a distance, she asked, "Father, how did you enter the city? Why do those people seem to be afraid of you?" A certain someone placed little nine on the ground and said coldly, "Is it fun to tease me? If you call me father again, I will throw you back to Starry Night City." Little nine giggled. "So what if you don't call me daddy? I'm just trying to get out of the city successfully. If I call you Prince Charming, those people will think I'm a little crazy. Prince Charming, you haven't answered me yet. How did you get into the city?" A certain someone said coldly, "I just killed an official and stole his identity document." Yunchujio, all right, those who had strength were capricious. If it were her, even if she could steal the identity document, she wouldn't dare to use it. Who knew if she would run into someone she knew? A certain someone summoned his flying spirit tool, brought Yunchujio up and drove towards the border. Little Xiaojio said anxiously, "Idle daddy, quickly give me the antidote." "Male god daddy?" A certain someone looked at little nine coldly. Little nine had an innocent look on her face. Didn't she not allow her to call him daddy? Then calling him male god daddy would be fine, right? Infuriating you to death. Their gazes converged in the air and sparks flew in all directions. Finally little nine was defeated. She pouted and said, "Where's the antidote?" "There is no antidote. This is the herb that you lack. However, there is still one herb that has yet to be found. Yun Chujio looked at the herb that Di Biming had given her. There was still one missing ghost face orchid. She could not help but frown. This ghost face orchid was the most difficult to find. Prime Minister Sima had not found it either. Could it be that she still had to be a child for a long time? Di Biming saw that the little girl was squatting on the ground and had a worried look on her face. He hesitated for a moment and said, "This venerable one knows a place that might have ghost face orchids. This venerable one will bring you to pick a few of them." The worried look on Xiaoxiao's face disappeared. Her bright smile lit up the entire cabin. She hugged a certain someone's thigh and jumped up and down. "Idol Daddy, I knew you were the best. I love you the most. Let go." A certain someone gently flicked his sleeve and Xiao Xiao fell on her butt. Xiao Xiao, damn it. She decided to feed all the emotions in her heart to the dogs. Without even looking at Xiao Xiaojiu who was sitting on the ground, a certain venerable walked out of the cabin. Xiao Xiaojiu stood up, rubbed her little butt and scolded, "Damn it, if I wasn't afraid of teasing you to your old ailment, I wouldn't have been able to tease you to death." The little black bird inside the spirit beast bag secretly said, "Master, with your little body, you can't tease me even if you want to." Xiao Xiaojiu looked at her small arms and legs, looking like she wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Yes, even Xiao Longbao was gone, so why would she flirt with me? Chapter 3447 You feed me. Xiao Xiaojiu climbed onto the chair, feeling a little discouraged. She swayed her short legs and chewed on the spiritual fruit. This guy comforted himself. No matter what, since the gigolo could come, it meant that he still cared about her. When he unsealed another layer of the seal, he might not have to seal his 7 emotions and 6 desires anymore. After this guy calmed himself down, he threw away the finished fruit core, climbed down the chair, and stomped out of his cabin to look for Di Biming. A certain someone was sitting cross-legged in meditation. Although he knew that Yun Chujio was here, he didn't intend to pay attention to her. Little Nine squatted in front of a certain someone and looked at his face. The more she looked at him, the more she felt that she had good taste. She couldn't help but reach out her little paws to touch his face. Unfortunately, before her little paws touched his face, she fell on her butt. One of the figures opened his eyes and stared coldly at little Nine, who was rubbing her butt. He said coldly, "Since you're here, come and cultivate." Little Nine pouted and could only sit next to one of the figures, combing the lightning spiritual force in her body. Little Nine was quite serious in her cultivation at the beginning. Later, she fell asleep in a daze and her body could not help but lean toward one of the figures next to her. A certain person frowned and moved to the side. Little Nine fell to the ground with a thud. Fortunately, there was a thick blanket on the ground. This fellow opened his eyes in a daze and looked for a moment before continuing to sleep soundly. When a certain person saw Little Nine's heartless look, his face remained expressionless as he continued to meditate and cultivate. After a moment, a certain person opened his eyes and took out a quilt from his storage ring to cover Little Nine. Little Nine slept until evening. When she opened her eyes, she saw the blanket on her body and then looked at a certain venerable who was still meditating. The corners of her mouth curled up as she said sweetly, "Northern Sea Daddy." Little Nine saw the cold eyes of a certain venerable and immediately changed her words, "Big brother Northern Sea, you were the one who covered me with the blanket, right? I knew you would feel sorry for me." A certain someone opened his eyes and looked at Little Nine coldly. He said emotionlessly, "I was afraid that you would get sick and delay my journey." Little Nine smiled even more happily. "Big brother Beiming, you still say you don't feel sorry for me? Aren't you worried that I would get sick because you feel sorry for me?" A certain someone decided to ignore Little Nine's shameless self-talk. Hence, he closed his eyes and continued to cultivate, ignoring the smiling Little Nine. Little Nine pursed her lips, rubbed her stomach and said, "Big brother Beiming, I'm hungry." There was no reaction. Little Nine stretched her neck and shouted again, "Big brother Beiming, I'm hungry." There was still no reaction. Little Nine was furious. As expected, no matter how loud the noise was, it could not wake up a person who pretended not to hear. This fellow rolled his eyes and took out a table from his storage ring. Then he took out a few dishes and stood on the small stool to eat. A certain person heard that something was wrong. He hesitated for a moment and opened his eyes. He saw the little person standing on the chair and grabbing the food on the plate with his hands. His face looked like a small cat, his body was also covered in vegetable soup and rice grains. A certain person frowned and said coldly, "Your body became smaller. Did your brain also disappear? Don't you know how to use chopsticks when eating? Knowing is one thing but doing is another." My fingers are so short, how can I use chopsticks? Why don't you feed me? Little Nine said righteously. Chapter 34:48. Emotionless ice sculpture. As soon as Little Nine finished speaking, she felt the coldness emanating from a certain person. The person said pitifully, "It's fine if you don't want to. I don't usually beg others for things that I can do myself." Little Nine stretched out her fleshy claws to grab the ribs that were furthest away from her. As the distance was too far and her small arms were short, she was practically sprawled on the table. Even the small stool under her feet was on the verge of collapsing. Seeing that Little Nine was about to fall to the ground, a certain someone grabbed Little Nine by her collar and lifted her up. Little Nine immediately struggled like a little bastard. "Put me down, I want to eat meat." "You want to eat back in your own room?" A certain someone grabbed Little Nine and directly threw her into her own cabin, then slammed the door shut with a bang. Little Nine, a certain honored guest, returned to his own cabin and saw the mess on the ground. His gaze was slightly cold. He waved his sleeves and even the carpet on the ground was replaced with a new set. Only then did he continue to meditate and cultivate. After a short while, a certain honored guest felt that there was someone peeping at the door. He frowned slightly. He didn't need to look to know that the person peeping was definitely that little rascal. Little Nine, who was peeping through the gap of the door, cursed silently. It was nothing more than a heartbreaker, a scumbag, and someone without a conscience. After cursing for a while, she saw that the certain someone was not paying attention to her. She could only take her short legs and return to her cabin. This fellow was so frustrated that she made herself look like a little kitten. She was also unable to get that heartbreaker to feed her. It was as if she had thrown a stone at her own feet. She was extremely depressed. However, very quickly, a crafty look flashed across this fellow's eyes. "If you don't feed me, then I'll let you sleep with me." After Little Nine had washed her face, she pushed open the cabin door of a certain someone with her short legs. A certain someone finally opened his eyes and looked at her. "What's the matter?" Little Nine staggered a few steps and then pounced on a certain someone. A certain someone wanted to slap her away, but looking at her small body, he reckoned that she would be seriously injured if he slapped her. He could only use his hand to support her. "What are you doing?" "Big Brother Bei Ming, I can't sleep. Sing a lullaby for me." Little Nine said as she blinked her starry eyes. A certain someone's expression turned even colder. "If you can't sleep, then cultivate." Little Nine, damn it. This psychopath wasn't just any ordinary difficult person to deal with. Little Nine pursed her lips, sat down cross-legged next to a certain someone, and began to cultivate. Of course, this fellow's intentions weren't in the wine. After a short while, his body fell in the direction of a certain someone. Seeing that he was about to lean on a certain someone's body, a certain someone stood up and changed places. The miserable Little Nine fell to the ground with a thud. Little Nine was so angry. She punched the ground a few times with her small fists and pointed at a certain someone with an aggrieved expression. "Are you still human? I'm so young now and you're still bullying me like this." The certain someone acted as if he didn't hear her and didn't even look at Little Nine. Little Nine was instantly discouraged. Talking to an emotionless ice sculpture was simply a waste of time. "Fuck, go to sleep." Little Nine took out a blanket and pillow and fell asleep on the ground. Soon she fell asleep soundly. After a certain someone felt that Little Nine's breathing was stable, he opened his eyes and glanced at her. Then he closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. The next morning Little Nine was alive and kicking again. "Prince Charming, where's the ghost face orchid? How long will it take us to get there?" This guy was too lazy to call him Daddy and Brother Bei Ming to tease a certain someone. Chapter 34:49. Ghost Face Orchid. It is said that there are ghost face orchids in the Orchid Valley. "We will reach the Orchid Valley in about 10 days, Bei Ming said faintly. Little Nine took out a piece of sugar ball and threw it into her mouth. She asked vaguely, "Then where is the Orchid Valley? Is it dangerous?" "The Orchid Valley is in the territory of the first-class country, Juntian country." Bei Ming did not say anything about whether it was dangerous or not. Obviously, he felt that there was no need to answer Little Nine's question. Little Nine curled her lips. So what if her spiritual power was high? Sooner or later she would also become powerful. In the next few days, Little Nine provoked a certain someone with different tricks. Unfortunately, the certain someone was not moved at all and allowed Little Nine to play tricks. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been discouraged long ago. However, He Xinjiu was obviously not an ordinary person. This fellow was stimulated by his fighting spirit and was simply not tired of it. On this day they finally arrived at the entrance of the Yulon Valley. He Xingjiu followed Di Biming out of the flying spirit tool. When she saw that there were many people gathered in the distance, she could not help but wonder, why were there so many people? Could it be that they were all here to look for the ghost face orchid? Why didn't they enter? At this moment, those people's gazes were also looking at Di Biming and He Xingjiu. To be exact, they were looking at Di Biming. Where did this young man come from? Why was his aura so shocking? What surprised them was that they could not see through Di Biming's cultivation, which meant that this young man's spiritual power was higher than theirs. Especially some of the women who were looking at Di Biming with infatuation. Such a handsome and noble man was the best choice for their husband. They had come to the Yulon Valley for the right reason. He Xingjiu was furious when she saw the infatuated gazes of those women. What the fuck, where were they looking at? This was her man. A bunch of shameless flirtatious bitches. If she had known this would happen, she would have let the pretty boy eat a disguise pill. What a miscalculation. This guy rolled his eyes and hugged Di Biming's thigh. Daddy hug. Daddy? Disappointment appeared on the faces of those women. So he had already married and had children. What a pity. Di Biming's gaze was slightly cold as he stared at little Nine, who was begging for a hug. In the end, he still carried her. He was also very surprised to see so many people at the entrance of the Yulon Valley. He had originally planned to pick a few ghost face orchids and leave. He did not expect that there would be complications. What were these people gathered here for? Just as Di Biming was thinking, a woman walked over shyly and timidly. Young master, are you also here for the ghost face orchids? Di Biming faintly acknowledged and coldly said, why don't you guys go in? The woman was clearly a little dizzy from Di Biming's voice. After a while she said, young master, you might not know this, but this Yulon Valley is not always open. You need a specific time to enter. In less than an hour, the Yulon Valley will open. Di Biming nodded his head indifferently and did not say anything else. When the woman saw that Di Biming did not speak, she continued, although there is a ghost face orchid in the Yulon Valley, the ghost face orchid is different from other herbs. It is difficult for ordinary people to find its traces, so even if you can enter the Yulon Valley, you might not be able to find the ghost face orchid. When the woman said this, her gaze turned to look at Di Biming. She said with a hint of self-satisfaction, however, our Juntian Kingdom's imperial clan has a treasure to look for the ghost face orchid. Young master will follow this princess in a while. You will definitely be able to find the ghost face orchid. Chapter 3450. The people from Zhang Li's hateful palace had also arrived. Princess? Little Nine narrowed her eyes. No wonder the others seemed to be afraid of this woman. So she was the princess of the June Heaven Kingdom? However, this princess was really shameless. When the other women heard that her gigolo was already a father, they knew that it was difficult and retreated. However, this one came forward. Could it be that she wanted the gigolo to divorce his wife and marry someone else? Although little Nine wanted to curse the princess in her heart, she thought of what she said. If she couldn't bear it, she would mess up the big plan. It was better to get the ghost face orchid first. When little Nine was thinking about it, she heard Di Biming say coldly, no need. Little Nine's heart was a little complicated. On one hand, she was satisfied with the cold attitude of a certain lord towards the other girls. On the other hand, she was a little annoyed at the one-track mind of a certain lord. No matter what, she had to get the ghost face orchid first. There was a moment of gloominess on the princess' face, but soon a smile appeared on her face. Since young master is confident, then Ziyu will not disturb you. After Princess Ziyu finished speaking, she did not continue to pester her and returned to her own team. An hour later, the thick fog at the entrance of the Yulon Valley dispersed, revealing the entrance of the valley. Princess Ziyu was the first to walk in, and the people behind her also followed her in. Little Nine whispered into a certain venerable's ear, why didn't you agree with Princess Ziyu just now? This way we can save a lot of trouble. A certain venerable was a little uncomfortable with the hot air that little Nine exhaled. He tilted his head slightly and said, if you can't find it, just kill them and snatch the ghost face orchid. Little Nine, alright, there was nothing that could not be solved by snatching. Of course, the prerequisite was that you were strong enough. Just as a certain venerable was about to carry little Nine into the Yulon Valley, another group of people came from the distance. Although little Nine could not see through their spiritual power, it was clear that their spiritual power was much higher than Princess Ziyu and the others. Little Nine caught a glimpse of the symbol on the lower right corner of their clothes and her heart tightened. The Li Hate Palace? They were actually people from the Li Hate Palace. They were also here for the ghost face orchid? Although the ghost face orchid was precious, the Li Hate Palace could definitely demand it from the Jun Tiantian kingdom. Why would they need to personally send people here? Could it be that there were other treasures in this orchid valley? Just as Yun Chujio was pondering, the people from the Li Hate Palace had already arrived in front of them. Their gazes paused on Di Biming for a moment and did not say anything else. They quickly entered the orchid valley. Di Biming's eyes were also slightly surprised. After the people from the Lihan Palace had left, he carried little Nine and entered the Yulan Valley. Once they entered the Yulan Valley, Yun Chujio finally understood the origins of the Yulan Valley. There were all kinds of orchids everywhere. Although the varieties were not particularly precious, they still looked very pleasing to the eye. Di Biming carried little Nine and walked for a while. He frowned slightly. He did not expect the Yulan Valley to be so big. If they continued to walk aimlessly, they would probably return empty-handed. Hence, he followed the trail of footsteps and chased after Princess Ziyu. Although Di Biming was carrying little Nine, his speed was still very fast. He could see Princess Ziyu and the others from afar, but he did not see the people from the Li Hate Palace. However, Di Biming and Yun Chujio's priority was to pick the ghost face orchid, so they did not pay too much attention to the whereabouts of the people from the Li Hate Palace. Princess Ziyu glanced at Di Biming, who was walking over, and felt a little pleased. She had rejected him so readily before, but now he was still following them. Chapter 3451 My father's surname is Bei. Princess Ziyu's gaze was infatuated as she looked at Di Biming, who was approaching her. She had never seen such an outstanding man, especially that kind of unapproachable aura. It made her very infatuated. Even if this man already had a wife and children, she would still want him. As for his wife and this little bastard, she would just find an opportunity to kill them. Although Princess Ziyu was scheming evil thoughts in her heart, the words she said were very understanding. This young master is really a coincidence. We meet again. Why don't we look for the ghost face orchid together? I have many people here and I can help you look after your daughter. Di Biming nodded slightly. Princess Ziyu immediately let her subordinates carry little Jiao, but Di Biming said coldly, no need. He Xinjiao was quite satisfied with Di Biming's actions. If he dared to let others carry her, she would cry for him to see. May I know how to address you, young master? Princess Ziyu asked shyly. My father's surname is Bei and his name is Beiyu. He's a big fish. It's the kind of fish that can be eaten. But if you don't eat it well, you'll get fishy all over. Little Jiao said softly. Di Biming's face stiffened and he tightened his grip on He Xinjiao. Princess Ziyu felt that the little girl's words had a hidden meaning, and there was a hint of mockery in them. She could not help but feel angry in her heart, and there was a trace of viciousness in her eyes as she looked at little Nine. It would be better to find an opportunity to kill this little bastard in this Yulan Valley, so as to avoid ruining her good deed. Even so, she still said with a slightly red face, Young Master Bei, ghost face orchids usually live in dark and damp places. We found ghost face orchids not far ahead, let's go and take a look. Di Biming hummed and followed Princess Ziyu and the others. After walking for about 2 hours they came to a shrub. This place was close to a stream, and there were many withered branches and leaves under the low shrub. This was the most suitable place for ghost face orchids to grow. He Xinjiao was puzzled. Didn't Princess Ziyu say that she had a treasure to look for ghost face orchids? What kind of treasure was it? Just as He Xinjiao was puzzled, Princess Ziyu took out a bead that was emitting a faint blue light. Princess Ziyu explained, Young Master Bei, the ghost face orchid is the best at disguising itself. It's very difficult to be discovered by others. However, the blue light emitted by the orchid bead in my hand can easily discover the ghost face orchid. Di Biming nodded indifferently and did not say anything. Princess Ziyu was slightly disappointed. This young Master Bei was too cold. It was probably because of the little bastard in his arms. He really deserved to die. Princess Ziyu held the orchid pearl in her hand and searched through the bushes. Unfortunately, she did not find anything. Someone sighed, this ghost face orchid is getting harder and harder to find. Could it be that I have to return empty-handed again? Yeah, it's been many years since we've found any traces of ghost face orchids. What the hell? Where did those ghost face orchids go? Princess Ziyu heard her subordinates' complaints and coughed unhappily. Everyone immediately fell silent. Let's go to the ghost cave and try our luck. Maybe we'll find something there, Princess Ziyu said as she glanced at little Nine in Di Biming's arms. Immediately, an elderly woman advised, Princess, the ghost cave is extremely dangerous. Although the ghost face orchid is precious, it's not worth the risk. Let's just forget about it. Princess Ziyu said unhappily, Granny Lu, I've made up my mind. You don't have to say it. Chapter 3452. The ghost is here. Granny Lu saw that Princess Ziyu's attitude was firm, so she did not dare to say anything more. Therefore the group left the bushes and headed towards the ghost cave. Hei Xingjiu naturally did not ignore the malicious gaze Princess Ziyu gave her. She sneered in her heart. Was she trying to stir up trouble in the ghost cave and kill her? Diske, she was really courting death. Not to mention that she had a gigolo by her side. Even if she did not have a gigolo, she still had many ways to kill this little bitch. Thinking of the gigolo, Hei Xingjiu felt a little comforted. No matter what, this heartless person had been hugging her for 4 hours and had no intention of letting go of her, even though it was a little cold. But at least he knew how to protect her. This guy rolled his eyes. Daddy, it's so tiring to carry me all the time. Let them carry me with the pole. Princess Ziyu could not wait to have such an opportunity. She immediately ordered her subordinates to take out the pole. Di Biming glanced at Hei Xingjiu and saw that her eyes were full of cunning. After a moment of silence, he put her on the pole. Hei Xingjiu sat on the pole and took out some melon seeds. She was munching on them while humming a tune, looking very relaxed. Seeing that Di Biming had finally regained his freedom, Princess Ziyu immediately went over and wanted to talk to him. She did not expect Di Biming to flash to the side of the pole. Obviously he was not going to say anything to her. Princess Ziyu was so angry that she gritted her teeth. In her heart she became even more determined to kill little Nine. After walking for about 4 hours, they finally arrived at the entrance of the ghost cave. Hei Xingjiu looked at the footprints on the ground and her heart moved. It seemed that the people from the Li Hate Palace had already entered the ghost cave. What secrets did this ghost cave contain? The ghost cave was very narrow and could only allow one person to pass through. Princess Ziyu gave the 2 people who were carrying the pole a look. The meaning was obvious. She wanted to find a chance to kill little Nine. Unexpectedly, Di Biming stretched out his arm and picked little Nine up from the pole. He was the first to enter the ghost cave. Princess Ziyu gritted her teeth. She hated him in her heart. Anyway, there were plenty of opportunities inside. Let's see if you can always protect her. Little Nine hugged Di Biming's neck and looked at Princess Ziyu, who was following closely behind. She secretly mouthed, "Fuck crazy?" Princess Ziyu was so angry that she almost vomited blood. This bastard. Little Nine saw that Princess Ziyu was so angry that her face turned red. A sweet smile appeared on her face and she kissed Di Biming's face. Di Biming's body stiffened. He paused for a moment and then continued to walk forward. Hei Xingjiu stopped when she saw the situation. She did not continue to flirt with a certain someone but instead looked at this so-called ghost cave. The ground was very slippery and there was some moss growing on it. There was nothing special about it. Of course, it might be because this was just the entrance and the deeper one went, the more dangerous it would be. Princess Ziyu finally calmed down and said gently, "Young Master Bei, the reason why this ghost cave is called a ghost cave is because there are many rarely seen ferocious demonic beasts and it is said that it is haunted. Of course, it is very likely that this is just a rumor. People are just trying to scare themselves." Before Princess Ziyu finished her sentence, she heard little Nine scream in fear, "Ghosts! There are ghosts! The ghosts are coming!" Princess Ziyu and the others were scared out of their wits and wanted to retreat. However, the tunnel was too narrow. As they pushed and shoved, a few of them squeezed into the tunnel and made a mess. At this moment, everyone heard little Nine say with a smile, "Haha, I'm joking with you. Isn't it fun?" Chapter 3453. My father is a slave to his wife Princess Ziyu and the others almost died from anger. This little girl was really too wicked. She was already scared to death in this ghost cave, but she actually intentionally scared them. She was really crafty. Yun Chujia's smile was extremely bright. She stole a glance at Di Biming's deep eyes and saw that there was actually a hint of a smile in them. She was stunned in her heart, but when she looked again, she still looked like an ancient well without any ripples. This fellow curled his lips in his heart. He wanted to laugh but did not. He was not afraid of stifling his internal injuries. Thinking about internal injuries, Hei Xingjiu thought wickedly. Could it be that this gigolo had sealed his 7 emotions and 6 desires because he could not eat her for a long time? Otherwise, it would indeed be easy to stifle his internal injuries. However, thinking about it, it was really tragic. Fortunately, the lifespan of people in the towering sky continent was more than 1,000 years. She was still considered a young and beautiful girl. Otherwise, it would really be fatal if she did not come to Kueishui from the beginning to the end. After walking for more than an hour, the passage gradually became spacious. In the end, if it were not for the stone walls covering the several hundred feet high place, they would really think that this was a valley and not a cave. However, there was no light source in the cave. Fortunately, everyone had night luminescent pearls on them, so they didn't delay their walk. They found some corpses of demonic beasts one after another. The blood on them had not dried yet. Apparently, someone had just left here. Princess Ziyu couldn't help but ask in surprise, could it be that someone has come in? Who exactly is it? Hei Shinjio could not help but twitch her lips. Only now did she realize that someone had entered. They were truly stupid. It was rare for Di Biming to open his mouth and say, "We met people from the Li Hate Palace at the entrance of the valley. These demonic beasts must have been killed by them." People from the Li Hate Palace? Princess Ziyu suddenly raised her voice. What are they doing here? Could it be that they are also here to find the ghost face orchid? If we find the ghost face orchids, we will naturally have to offer them to the Li Hate Palace. There is no need for them to personally come and pick the ghost face orchids, right? No one replied to Princess Ziyu's words because they were also puzzled. Nanny Lu once again advised, "Princess, since the people from the Li Hate Palace are in front, let's go back." Princess Ziyu glanced at the expressionless Di Biming. "Young Master Bei, what do you think?" Di Biming did not say anything and continued walking forward. Little Nine said softly, "You can go back now. My father loves his wife very much and will not marry anyone else, so it's useless for you to follow him. Why bother? Let me tell you, my father is a wife slave. He washes his wife's feet, massages her shoulders and massages her legs every day. At night he even sings lullabies to her. He doesn't even want her to walk on her own and carries her around every day." The jealousy in Princess Ziyu's heart grew like poisonous weeds. She had no intention of leaving in the first place. After hearing Hei Xinjia's words, it was even more impossible for her to leave. She was definitely going to take this man. Hei Shinjio saw that Princess Ziyu still had no intention of leaving. She thought to herself, this can't be blamed on me. I've already let her go. If she still doesn't leave, then she's courting death. Hei Xinjia's attention was on Princess Ziyu, but she didn't notice that when she said those words, a certain honored guest's expression was as cold as ice. He reckoned that if the situation wasn't wrong, he would definitely teach little Jio a lesson. The deeper they went, the more corpses the demonic beasts had. Hei Shinjio couldn't help but grumble, what a waste. These can all be sold for money. A certain lord's body stiffened. In his memory, this little rascal seemed to have a lot of money. Why was he so obsessed with money? Chapter 3454. When Princess Ziyu heard Yun Chujia's words, her heart was filled with joy. This little bastard's words, did it mean that young Master Bai's family background was not very good? As long as she became her prince consort, she would have countless spirit stones. Who knows, she might even be able to move young Master Bai's heart. When Hei Shinjio saw Princess Ziyu's face filled with infatuation, she could not help but feel disdain in her heart. Have you never seen a man before? To actually covet her man, how shameless. Fuck, if it wasn't for Guai Chao causing trouble, the gigolo would have long been hers. Monkeys could give birth to several of them. That damn Go Weiba. Guai Chao and his Danton, there were always a few days every month when he had to be scolded. He was already used to it. As he walked, a faint blue light came from the front. It looked similar to the light emitted by Princess Ziyu's pearl. Everyone quickened their steps and soon sounds of fighting could be heard from the front. With the faint blue light, they could see that the people of the Li Hate Palace were fighting with several giant snakes. Heavens! It's a 59th level dark poison giant snake. Princess, let's retreat quickly. Nanny Lu said in terror. The 59th level dark poison giant snake was equivalent to those at the 3rd to 4th level of psychic power. Although there were also people at the 4th level of psychic power among the people Princess Ziyu brought, there were dozens of dark poison giant snakes. They would definitely not benefit from it. Just as Princess Ziyu was hesitating, she heard someone in front of her shout, "Since they are from the Jun Tian Kingdom, why aren't you coming over to help? Do you want to leave them to die?" Princess Ziyu did not dare to leave even if she wanted to. Even if she was a princess of the Jun Tian Kingdom, she did not dare to offend the Lihan Palace. Princess Ziyu could only leave a few people to protect herself and let the others come forward to help. Di Biming stood to the side with little Nine in his arms and could only watch indifferently. A cold glint flashed across Di Biming's eyes as he coldly asked Princess Ziyu, "There should be ghost face orchids in the imperial palace of your Jun Tiantian kingdom, right?" Princess Ziyu did not expect Di Biming to take the initiative to speak to her. She was simply too excited and did not have the time to lie. She honestly said, "Young Master Bei, we have not found ghost face orchids for several years. The ones we picked previously were all given to the Li Hate Palace, so there are no ghost face orchids in our imperial palace." Di Biming frowned slightly. It would have been fine if there were ghost face orchids in the Juntian Kingdom's imperial palace. He could just force the Juntian Kingdom's emperor to take them out, but the Lihen Palace was a little difficult to deal with. Although his spiritual power was not low now, he still did not have much confidence in forcefully breaking into the Lihen Palace. It seemed that he could only try his luck in the Ghost Cave. If he really could not do it, he could only go to the Lihen Palace. Just as Di Biming was deep in thought, a giant poisonous snake suddenly crawled towards them quickly. It spat out its scarlet tongue, looking rather terrifying. Princess Ziyu cried out in shock, "You guys, quick, kill it!" Princess Ziyu's subordinates immediately went forward to stop the giant poisonous snake, and the two sides engaged in a battle. Di Biming was still holding on to Little Nine as he watched coldly from the side. He had no intention of extending his hand at all. Princess Ziyu's subordinates spent quite a while before they finally killed the giant poisonous snake. However, they looked at Di Biming with disdain. Although this man's spiritual power seemed to be quite high, he was probably just putting on a show. Otherwise, why didn't he extend his hand? He was probably afraid that he would be exposed if he extended his hand, right? Princess Ziyu was also a little displeased. Firstly, he actually only cared about that bastard of his and did not save him. Secondly, he was probably just a flowery pillow and did not have any real abilities. Chapter 3455. What a cute little thing. Princess Ziyu's thoughts suddenly changed a little. The sky-high continent respected the strong. No matter how handsome this man was, he would still be looked down upon by others if he did not have any abilities. Her gaze towards Di Biming immediately became less heated. She had really lost her mind just now. She had actually entered the ghost cave for him. She really deserved to die. After another 2 hours, those giant poisonous snakes were finally killed. The air was filled with the smell of blood. A small leader of the Lihen Palace walked over. He first nodded slightly to Princess Ziyu, then his gaze landed on the spotless Di Biming. He sneered a few times, then said, "This young master is really calm. Our lives were hanging by a thread just now, yet you just watched coldly from the side. Since that's the case, help us scout ahead." Di Biming slightly curled the corner of his mouth. A trace of sternness flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. He lifted his leg and walked forward. It was obvious that he had agreed to scout ahead for everyone. If it was before, Princess Ziyu would definitely put in a few good words for them. But now her thoughts had changed, so she didn't say anything. Instead, she wanted to leave. But that small leader said, "Since we're here, let's go together." Princess Ziyu didn't dare to say anything else and could only follow him. Hei Xingjiu held Di Biming's neck and her eyes flashed as she looked at Di Biming's eyes. She was a little nervous at first, but when she saw the calmness in Di Biming's eyes, she immediately knew that the gigolo must have used these people to find the ghost face orchid, which was why he didn't kill them. Otherwise, none of these little dregs would be able to live. After walking for a short while, they found a huge nest. There were some demon beast eggs inside, and some of them had already begun to hatch. It was clearly the nest of those giant dark poison snakes from before. No wonder those giant dark poison snakes had come out in full force. They were probably afraid that the people of the Li Hate Palace would harm their young. The people of the Lihen Palace put away those demonic beast eggs and urged Di Biming to continue walking forward. After walking for some distance, they heard the roars of beasts. 2 giant blue demonic tigers blocked their way. Hei Xingjiu widened her eyes and said in surprise, "What a beautiful kitten. This is the first time I've seen a blue kitten. Daddy, I want to play with them for a while." The 2 blue tigers, Princess Ziyu snorted coldly, "These are level 61 blue tigers, not kittens. You want to play with them? Are you courting death?" Yun Chujio ignored her and looked at the 2 blue tigers instead. She said softly, "Kittens, run." "These people are very fierce. They are not as kind as my father and I are. They will kill you." A trace of confusion flashed across the 2 blue tigers' huge eyes. This little human girl actually advised them to run? She actually did not want them to be killed? Since that was the case, then she would eat the others first and then her. When the two blue tigers thought of this, they actually bypassed Di Biming and Yun Chujio, who were at the front, and pounced on the people behind them. Those people felt as if their hearts were going to explode. Were these two giant blue tigers blind? Why didn't they attack the father and daughter? Why did they have to attack them? Hei Shinjio took out a spirit fruit and said vaguely while chewing, "Daddy, those two kittens look so cute when they fight. I've never seen such a cute little thing." Everyone, cute? Little thing? Damn it, not only were the two giant blue tigers blind, but this little girl was even more blind. Chapter 3456. Blue Bats. Although the two indigo tiger spirit ranks were not low, the Li Hate Palace and the Jun Tiantian Kingdom combined had several dozen people. They were soon at a disadvantage. Little Nine chewed on a fruit as she shouted, "Little things, quickly run or you'll really lose your lives." The two indigo tigers looked at each other and then ran away. The people of the Li Hate Palace, Princess Ziyu, and the others did not want to waste time with the demonic beasts, so no one chased after them. The leader of the Li Hate Palace urged Di Biming to continue exploring. Di Biming carried Little Nine and continued to walk forward leisurely. The deeper they went, the brighter the blue light became. Hei Shinjio was very curious. What on earth could emit such a strong light? There must be a good treasure. Just as Hei Shinjio was thinking about it, countless black shadows suddenly flew towards them. They were so fast that no one could see what was flying towards them. Di Biming did not attack those things. Instead, he waved his sleeves to form a spiritual energy shield, protecting him and little Jio within it. Hei Shinjio blinked her eyes and looked at those things that were continuously attacking the spiritual energy shield. Only when she got closer did she see clearly that they were countless blue vampire bats. Their bodies were emitting a faint blue light. Hei Shinjio was shocked. Could it be that the blue light that they saw was emitted by these bats? Heavens, the light was so bright. How many of these bats were there? Princess Ziyu and the others had already fought with those bats. From time to time, they could hear the screams of cultivators and bats. However, it seemed that these bats alone were not a match for Princess Ziyu and the others. As expected, after a fierce battle, Princess Ziyu and the others finally killed all the blue bats. However, they had also lost a few people. When they saw Di Biming and Xiaoxiao's spotless appearance, they were both puzzled and indignant. That man had only formed a spiritual energy barrier, but the blue bats actually did not break through? But that was also true. They had attracted the bats' attention, so he naturally took advantage of them. At this time, Princess Ziyu really wanted to retreat, but before she could say anything she was frightened by the little leader's cold gaze and didn't dare to say anything more. In her heart she was angry at Di Biming. If it wasn't for him, why would she enter this ghost cave on impulse? He and that little bastard deserved to die. This time, Di Biming did not use his little leader to urge him. He carried Little Nine and continued to walk forward. Not long after, another group of blue bats flew over. Just like before, Di Biming still maintained his spiritual energy barrier and calmly watched the show from the side. After Princess Ziyu and the others fought, a few more people died and were injured. Princess Ziyu did not care whether she was afraid or not. She said with a sharp voice, "No. Those blue lights in front must be emitted by these blue bats. If we continue to move forward we will die. I want to go back." Those people from the Jun Heaven Kingdom did not want to move forward for a long time. When they heard Princess Ziyu's words, they wanted to protect Princess Ziyu and retreat. The leader of the Lihan Palace sneered, "Princess Ziyu, if you leave now, I guarantee that you will be expelled by the imperial family tomorrow, and your followers will also be wiped out." Princess Ziyu and her followers felt a chill in their hearts. They absolutely did not doubt the words of the leader. Although the Jun Heaven Kingdom was a first-class country, if the Li Hate Palace blamed them, the emperor would definitely sacrifice them. Even if Princess Ziyu was a princess, they would also be abandoned. Chapter 3457. Blue Glaze. Princess Ziyu was being threatened. She could only say hesitantly, "My lord, it's not that I don't want to serve the Li Hate Palace. It's just that there are so many blue bats. I'm afraid we won't be a match for them. Moreover, will there be ghost face orchids here?" The leader sneered, "Who says we're looking for ghost face orchids? There's no need for you to say anything. Just follow us. If we succeed, there won't be any lack of benefits for you." At this moment, Princess Ziyu naturally did not dare to say anything else. She hesitantly agreed. Di Biming slightly frowned. If there were no ghost face orchids here, wouldn't he have wasted all his efforts? However, if they could obtain what the Li Hate Palace was looking for, it wouldn't be too bad. Perhaps they could use it to exchange for ghost face orchids. After a few more waves of blue bat attacks, nearly half of the people were killed or injured. Only then did they arrive at the end of the ghost cave. Everyone was stunned by the magnificent scene before them. They did not know what kind of or the stone wall was made of, but it was emitting a faint blue light. Countless ghost face orchids were attached to the stone wall. Under the blue light they looked like they were made of glass. The leader of the Li Hate Palace was ecstatic. "We found it. We finally found it. This is the blue marble. Quick, cut these blue marble carefully and take them away." Blue marble? Hei Xinjiu blinked her eyes. She had never heard of it and did not know what it was used for. Could it be that it was just because of its good looks? Di Biming's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He knew about the blue marble, but he did not expect that there was such a thing in the towering sky continent. The blue marble had a special effect, which was to dispel the inner demons and prevent cultivation deviation. The blue charm glaze could be said to be a treasure to those with profound cultivation. The more profound the cultivation, the harder it was to dispel the inner demons. With this blue charm glaze, one could at least prevent one from going berserk. However, Di Biming had no interest in this blue charm glaze. He was only interested in the ghost face orchid that was attached to the blue charm glaze. He said indifferently, "I need some ghost face orchids. I'll pick a few and you guys can cut the blue charm glaze." The reason why Di Biming said this was because he didn't want to cause trouble for no reason. After he obtained the ghost face orchids, he could send this little rascal back to the East Phoenix Kingdom. This way he could go back to his own matters. Who would have thought that the little leader of the Li Hate Palace would sneer again and again? "You want the ghost face orchids? With just you." "To tell you the truth, the reason why I let you live until now is because I want you to scout the way for us. Go kill him." The little leader waved his hand, and the people of the Li Hate Palace and Princess Ziyu immediately revealed fierce killing intent. Princess Ziyu snorted coldly and said nothing. A good-for-nothing who didn't know what was good for him could just die. Di Biming's expression didn't change in the slightest. He just put little Nine on the ground and said indifferently, "Go and pick the ghost face orchid." Hei Xinjiu was very confident in her man's perversion. She immediately ran to the stone wall to pick the ghost face orchid with her short legs, as if she did not know that the people behind her were going to kill them. Seeing Di Biming ignoring them, the leader said viciously, "Don't just stand there. Kill him right now." Immediately, 3 people rushed towards Di Biming. Although they knew that Di Biming's spiritual power was higher than theirs, they felt that it was easy for 3 people to kill him. Almost no one saw how Di Biming moved. The 3 people had already fallen to the ground and died. Chapter 3458, Shadow Transmission Stone. The little leader and the others were stunned. This man was actually so strong? However, at this point they could only fight to the death. The little leader shouted in exasperation, "What are you all standing there for? Attack together. Kill him." Everyone charged towards Di Biming. Princess Ziyu's heart was very complicated. She was filled with regret and hatred. She looked at little Nine who was picking the ghost face orchid. As long as she caught this bastard, that man could only surrender obediently. Hence, she took advantage of the moment when Di Biming was surrounded by everyone and leaped towards little Nine. Before her foot landed on the ground, an ice arrow pierced her forehead. She tried her best to look to the other side and saw that most of the people had already died. Even those who were still struggling on the brink of death would not be able to escape the fate of death. At this moment, Princess Ziyu truly regretted it. If she had known this would happen, she would have left when that little bastard told her to leave. One wrong step, one wrong step. The head of the Li Hate Palace was buzzing. It was over. None of them would survive today. If she had known this would happen, she would have let this man pick a few ghost face orchids. While the head was in a daze, the rest of the people were all killed by Di Biming. He gritted his teeth. Even if he did not survive today, this man and that little bastard would not be able to live. He took out a dark black stone from his storage ring and held it in his hand. When Di Biming saw the stone, his heart trembled. Almost instantly, a mask appeared on his face, then an ice arrow shot into the little leader's forehead. Di Biming struck the stone with his palm and instantly the stone turned into powder. When little Nine heard the sound, she turned her head and saw the black powder flying in all directions. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Male god, what is that thing?" Di Biming took off the mask on his face and said with a cold voice, "Shadow Stone." Before he died, he probably already teleported the situation here back to the Li Hate Palace. However, it's a good thing that there's only your back. Moreover, my true body also put on the mask at the first moment, so I shouldn't have teleported my true Bodhis appearance over. However, it's not good to stay here for long. The people of the Li Hate Palace will soon send people to the valley entrance to intercept us. We must leave as soon as possible. Yun Chujio nodded. She released 5 puppets to help her pick the ghost face orchids. These things were hard to come by, so she had to get more of them. Finally, she managed to pick most of the ghost face orchids on the stone wall. This fellow took out a large kitchen knife and began to cut the blue-colored glass. Since this thing was something the hateful palace wanted, it must be something good. They couldn't let it go to their advantage. When Di Biming saw Yun Chujio chop at the blue-colored glass, he didn't say anything. Although time was of the essence, it wasn't too late. Moreover, this blue-colored glass was very rare, so it was fine to get some. When he saw that little Nine was having a hard time, he simply took the large kitchen knife from her hand and helped her chop. Very quickly, the two chopped off a large piece of blue-colored glass and left the ghost cave. After carrying Yun Chujio out of the Orchid Valley, Di Biming rode on his flying spirit tool and sped towards the East Phoenix country. Hei Xinjiu could not wait to refine an antidote for the rejuvenation pill. Just as she was about to eat it, she heard a clank coming from the cabin next door. Hei Xinjiu was stunned. What was the pretty boy doing? She ran over with her short legs and saw Di Biming lying on the ground with a pale face. Although there was no ice on his body, his lips were still frozen until they turned blue. Chapter 3459 was actually Meilong Glaze. Yun Chujio helped Di Biming sit up and asked, "Prince Charming, what's wrong? Didn't you seal your 7 emotions and 6 desires? Why is the cold poison still acting up?" Di Biming's expression was still calm as he said coldly, "I don't know why, but the cold poison in my body suddenly acted up, and it's even more powerful than before." Yun Chujio frowned. It was even more intense than before? Could it be that something had triggered the thing in his body? Could it be the blue marble or the ghost face orchid? In order to verify her thoughts, Yun Chujio took out a ghost face orchid and waved it in front of Di Biming. Di Biming did not have any special reaction, but when Yun Chujio took out a piece of blue marble, Di Biming's face suddenly turned even paler. Clearly the blue marble was the culprit. Yun Chujio quickly put away the blue marble. This thing could actually trigger the cold poison in the gigolo's body? When she thought about how the people of the Li Hate Palace wanted to take the blue marble, could it be to deal with the gigolo? She shook her head. How was this possible? Even the gigolo himself didn't know that the blue marble would affect him, so how could the people of the Li Hate Palace know? It must be a coincidence. However, fortunately she had completely cut down the blue marble in the ghost cave. Even if the people of the Li Hate Palace really wanted to harm the gigolo, there was no way they could obtain it. Di Biming's eyes surged with emotions as he tightly clenched his fists. After a moment, his eyes regained their calmness. He said indifferently, "Although the blue charm glaze has triggered the cold poison, it has already been suppressed by this main body. There won't be any major problems. You can rest assured." Yun Chujio looked at Di Biming, whose face was as pale as a sheet of paper. She curled her lips slightly and said, "Don't you feel guilty saying this? Let me ask you, how much spiritual power do you have left? Don't tell me you don't have any left?" Di Biming was silent for a long while, and then said with a slightly bitter tone, "Less than 1%. Yun Chujio, this was not a big deal? Did he really think she was a 3-year-old child? Just as Hei Xinjiu was silently complaining, she was shocked. She ran to the observation window and saw several flying spiritual artifacts flying over, obviously trying to force them to land. Yun Chujio's heart sank. The people from the Palace of Hatred had arrived so quickly? It shouldn't be. At this moment, a shout came from one of the flying spirit tools, "Land immediately and accept the official's identity verification. Otherwise don't blame us for being impolite." Official's identity verification? It must be someone from the Jun Tiantian Kingdom. It must be an order from the Palace of Hatred. After all, they were in the Jun Tiantian Kingdom, so the people from the Jun Tiantian Kingdom could rush over immediately. However, what should they do next? It was definitely impossible to escape. If the pretty boy's cold poison had not taken effect, he could have easily dealt with these people. If they resisted now, they would be courting death. However, if they landed, they would not have any identity documents. Yun Chujio looked at her small arms and legs. Not to mention her current condition, even if she took the antidote, she would not be able to defeat so many people. What should she do? Yun Chujio stared at her little paws and her eyes lit up. She immediately ran to Di Biming and stuffed a pill into his mouth. Di Biming was caught off guard and swallowed the pill. He asked in confusion, "What kind of pill did you give me?" Yun Chujio didn't say anything. She just gloated at Di Biming. Chapter 3460. Debao and Xiaobao. Yun Chujio ignored him and took out a transfiguration pill and swallowed it. This guy thought about it and felt that it was still not safe. He took out the antidote for the rejuvenation pill and gently bit it. This guy thought about it and gave Di Biming another transfiguration pill. A moment later, there was only a little boy and a little girl left in the cabin. Both of them looked like they were only 5 or 6 years old. The little boy was stunned. Di Biming stared at his small arms and legs. The cold air emitted from his body was even colder than the cold poison. He looked at Yun Chujio coldly. "What do you want to do?" Yun Chujio said softly, "If I don't do this, how can I hide from them to check my identity? Later you will say that we have encountered bad people. In order to protect us, our parents lured away those bad people. If we ask you about your identity, you will cry. Do you hear me?" Although Di Biming was so angry that smoke was almost coming out of his head, he knew that this was also a solution. Anyway, he had the antidote in his hands. Once he was out of danger, he would just take the antidote. Perhaps because his body had become smaller, Di Biming felt that the influence of the cold poison had weakened a lot. Although his spiritual power was still very weak, at least he would have no problem walking. Yun Chujio took her short legs and controlled the flying spirit tool to land on the ground. Then she was led down the flying spirit tool by Di Biming. The people from the Juntian kingdom were stunned when they saw the two little kids. "Where are your parents?" Di Biming said with an indifferent expression. "We met some bad people on the way. In order to protect us, our parents lured those bad people away." Yun Chujio saw Di Biming's calm expression and cursed in her heart. He couldn't even act. He was so stupid. She pursed her lips and hugged Di Biming's waist. She pinched him hard on the waist and started sobbing. "Brother, I'm scared. I want father, I want mother." Sob. Di Biming was pinched so hard that his mouth twitched. He finally realized that his expression was too calm. In order to cover it up, he had to lower his head and remain silent. The people from the Juntian kingdom sized up the two little ones. Then they thought of the orders from above. A cold man and a 3 or 4-year-old little girl. These two were obviously not of the same age. Moreover, the little boy's face was pale. It seemed that he was seriously ill. It was impossible for these two little kids to be wanted criminals. The leader frowned and said, "What are your names? What are your parents' names? Do you still remember where your home is?" Little Nine gave Di Biming a look. Di Biming squatted on the ground with a pale face. His forehead was full of bean-sized beads of sweat. Little Nine cried again, Big brother is sick. Big brother is called Debao and I am little Bao. We are both 5 years old, Sabas Obi." One of the subordinates approached the leader and said, "Boss, I think these two are too young. They look like twins. Even if you ask them, you won't be able to get anything out of them. Didn't they say that their parents lured the enemy away? Maybe they will come and look for them in a while. Besides, the capital is not far ahead. After they enter the city, there will naturally be people who will pity them and help them. We have important matters to attend to, so it's better to ignore these two little kids. Otherwise, if the higher-ups blame us, our lives will be in danger." The leader nodded and then said to the two little ones, "In order to catch the important criminals, the entire Juntian kingdom is prohibited from flying. A few miles south is Yangli City. Go into the city and ask for help." Di Biming struggled to stand up and nodded his head. Little Nine said in a childish voice, "Thank you. You're really good people." The officers and soldiers were amused by Little Nine's words. They gave a few more instructions and then left. Chapter 3461. Two small hands holding hands. Yun Chujio looked at the flying spirit tool in the distance and looked at little Ming, who had an indifferent expression. "Let's enter the city first. The most dangerous place is the safest place. We will leave when your spiritual power has recovered." Di Biming nodded. Now, even if he was unwilling, he did not have the ability to resist. They did not have any identity documents, so they could only hide as children. Moreover, it was safer inside Jinli City than outside. At least there weren't any demonic beasts attacking. Yun Chujio reached out her small claws and held Di Biming's hand. Di Biming didn't say anything, but his small face was tight. Yun Chujio stared at the side of little Ming's face. Although he had taken a disguise pill, there was a type of person who was born to make people ignore his appearance. A certain someone was obviously this type. Regardless of his figure, appearance, or even his age, it did not affect him from becoming the focus of the crowd. Even if little Ming had become a little bun, his tightly pursed lips and cold eyes still gave off an aura that made people stay away from him. He had obviously restrained this aura just now. Otherwise, the officers and soldiers would not have believed him so easily. Yun Chujia's heart itched when she saw this. She leaned over and kissed little Ming's face. Little Ming's handsome face immediately turned red. He staggered and pursed his lips even tighter. He said coldly, "Men and women shouldn't be intimate. You should be more careful." Little Nine hugged her stomach and laughed so hard that she couldn't straighten her back. If Di Biming had said this before, it would have been a little intimidating. However, when this little bun said it in a soft child's voice, it was almost like he was acting coquettishly. Little Ming obviously realized this as well. He looked coldly at little Nine, who was laughing so hard that she was leaning back and forth. Then he walked quickly with his short legs. Obviously he wasn't going to bother with little Nine anymore. Hei Xinjiu looked at the desolate little figure in front of her and laughed even harder. Although the two of them were in danger now, it was really worth it to see the pretty boy become like this. The hands under the sleeves of a certain figure clenched tightly, and his eyes were dark. Damn it. He was too weak now. The little blue glaze had made him lose the ability to protect himself, let alone protect that little rascal. He had to take back what belonged to him as soon as possible. Hei Xinjiu hopped to the side of a certain figure. She held his little hand and said with a smile, "Little brother, don't be angry. No matter what, you have become smaller. At least the cold poison has weakened. When the cold poison is fine, we can take the antidote." A certain person's face was still expressionless, but he did not shake off Hei Xinjia's claws. He held her hand and walked out of Yangli City. The city of Yangli City was even more magnificent than Starry Night City. Its size was comparable to 5 or 6 Starry Night cities. There were many soldiers guarding the city gate. They strictly checked everyone's identity documents. Occasionally they would meet a handsome man or a 3 or 4-year-old girl, and they would be detained and interrogated strictly. Yun Chujio silently gave herself a 360-degree like, without any blind spots, and then looked at a certain person next to her proudly. A certain person was still expressionless, as if he did not see her gloating. Hei Xinjiu silently pinched him and said in a low voice, "Act well. Is there a little bun with a cold face like you?" Although Di Biming was reluctant, he had no choice but to restrain his aura. Outsiders might feel that this little boy was too cold, but they would not be too surprised. Chapter 3462 had a hint of cuteness. Yun Chujio had adjusted her spiritual power to the 8th layer of the spiritual venerable realm when she landed on the flying spirit tool. As for a certain one, he had also adjusted his spiritual power to the 8th layer of the spiritual venerable realm with a secret technique. The two of them held hands and arrived at the city gate. The soldiers guarding the city gate glanced at the two little ones. "Kids, where are your parents?" Yun Chujio pouted. "We got separated from them. An uncle told us to go into the city and wait for them." A few soldiers looked at the two little ones suspiciously. They looked to be about 5 or 6 years old, and their spiritual power was at the 8th layer of the spiritual venerable realm. They seemed to be quite talented, and their clothes were very exquisite. They should be children of big families. They didn't want to offend people, so their tone was quite good. They asked, "What uncle?" "Just like you guys, he's also a soldier. However, his clothes are purple and there's a mole on his chin. It seems like people call him Leader Zhang," Little Nine said softly. The soldiers looked at each other when they heard that. Leader Zhang was the commander of the royal guards. Since Leader Zhang had specifically instructed these two little dolls to enter the city, perhaps these two little dolls really had some background. Therefore, the soldiers did not continue interrogating. They waved their hands and let the two children enter Yangli City. A certain lord's eyes flashed. When this little scoundrel lied, he did not even blink his eyes. However, it made people feel that he was a little cute. He must have lost his brain because his body had become smaller. That must be it. Hei Xinjiu did not know what the certain someone was thinking. When she saw the bustling scene in the city, she immediately threw her worries to the back of her mind. Especially when she saw the snacks on both sides of the road, she could not walk anymore. The certain someone looked speechlessly at Little Nine, who had bought a huge pile of snacks. Hei Xinjiu held a candy man and ate as she walked. She smiled and asked a certain someone beside her, "Brother, try this. It's so sweet." A certain person looked at her indifferently and did not say anything. Hei Xinjiu curled her lips. She did not know how to enjoy life at all. If she did not want to eat, then so be it. Hei Xinjiu still wanted to go to the restaurant to have a big meal, but she was stopped by a certain person. Don't cause trouble. Let's find a bigger inn to stay in. Don't go out too much in the future. Although Hei Xinjiu was unwilling, she knew that Di Biming was right. It was better to keep a low profile. The two little ones finally chose a big inn and asked for a superior room to stay in. Although the owner of the inn was surprised to see only the two little kids, he thought that their parents would come soon, so he didn't say anything. This was also the reason why Di Biming and Yun Chujio chose the large inn. The owner and staff of the large inn were well informed and wouldn't be surprised. If they chose a small inn, they might get into trouble. The two little ones naturally did not want two rooms. At night, after little Nine washed up, she climbed onto the bed. Then, she saw a certain someone take out a futon and sit cross-legged on the ground to meditate. Little Nine pouted. If you want your cold poison to be bad, you can meditate on the ground tonight. I'm not a tiger, do you have to be so afraid of me? You don't even dare to sleep on the same bed as me? Besides, with your small body, I have no interest in doing anything. A certain venerable's body stiffened. He stood up and looked at Xiao Xiaojiu coldly. If you continue to speak without thinking, venerable, humph, what about you? Let me tell you, pretty boy, your fate is in my hands now. If you make me unhappy, I'll make you a little bun for the rest of your life. Hei Xinjiu said proudly. Chapter 3463 Miss Ming will treat you again tomorrow. A certain venerable looked at Hei Xinjiu, who was so proud that she forgot herself. He said coldly, my fate is in your hands? Hei Xinjiu straightened her back and said proudly, of course. If I don't give you the antidote, you can only do this. Why don't you come over and serve me well? Hei Xinjiu's heart was filled with joy. At first, she thought that turning over a serf and singing would be very far away. She didn't expect that she would have such a good opportunity by accident. If she didn't take the opportunity to torture the gigolo, she would regret it for the rest of her life. Little Jiu, you seem to have made a mistake. Even if my spiritual power is less than 1% now, it's still more than enough to deal with you. If you don't believe me, let's try. A certain venerable looked at Hei Xinjiu coldly. If she could be frightened by a few words, then she would not be Hei Xinjiu. Although this fellow's heart was beating a little, he still said arrogantly, even if you are stronger than me now, you have the frost poison. If you use your spiritual power, the frost poison might be even more serious. You won't take the risk, right? A certain man walked to the bedside and looked at Hei Xinjiu indifferently. Disrespectful people never get threatened. If you don't believe me, you can try. Hei Xinjiu calculated in her heart. Although this gigolo's face was a little pale, he seemed to be all right. Should she stir up a hornet's nest or not? While this guy was hesitating, a certain man was already lying on the outside of the bed. He put away the luminous pearl and said coldly, go to sleep. Hei Xinjiu blinked her eyes and decided to test him. Therefore, she reached out her chubby little claws and grabbed a certain man's hand by his side. Feeling the warmth in her palm, the certain hand hesitated for a moment and did not make a sound. It also did not shake off Hei Xinjiu's little claws. In the darkness, Hei Xinjiu curled the corners of her lips proudly. Then she rubbed and rubbed into the certain hand's embrace. Alright, although the two little ones were about the same size now, Hei Xinjiu somehow felt a sense of security. A certain body stiffened for a moment and said after a long while, aren't you afraid that you will catch a cold because of the cold air on my body? Hei Xinjiu said indifferently, I'm not afraid. Have you forgotten? I have the 10,000-year-old fire marrow on me. I even hugged you in the fallen god abyss last time. A certain body suddenly recalled some memories and the tip of his ears immediately turned red. He did not know if the 7 emotions and 6 desires that had been sealed had loosened, but the cold poison in his body instantly showed signs of worsening. Yun Chujio also felt the changes in Di Biming's body, and she did not dare to say anything more. Damn it, she did not say anything, so how did she get sick from flirting? She was simply wrong to death. However, Hei Xinjiu thought of the fallen god abyss and remembered that the Guaichao was able to attract the cold poison in Di Biming's body. Without saying anything, he kissed a certain being. A certain Jiu was struggling with the cold poison in his body. Who would have thought that Yun Chujio would kiss him secretly? Almost in an instant, something jumped into Yun Chujio's dantian from Di Biming's body. Yun Chujio was delighted. Looks like that thing didn't learn its lesson and was successfully seduced by Guaichao again. Di Biming also felt it, so he didn't push Yun Chujio away. However, a certain Jiu almost bit a certain Jiu's lips until they were swollen, but he didn't gain anything from it. This fellow could only give up dejectedly. He stretched out his small claws and patted a certain Jio's face. He said slyly, "Forget it, I don't think there will be any effect today. I'll treat you tomorrow." Chapter 3464, Uninvited Guests. A certain someone grabbed He Xingjia's claw. His cold voice was obviously filled with suppressed anger. "Little Jio, don't go too far." He Xingjio looked at the originally cold face of a certain someone under the moonlight. His face was flushed red, and his lips were also messed up by her. He said dryly, "Didn't I do it to help you get rid of the cold poison? Otherwise, do you think I would kiss you? I'm very reserved, all right?" A certain someone's pupils constricted slightly. "You're reserved? You're just like a female hooligan. It doesn't have anything to do with being reserved, all right?" He Xingjio yawned and mumbled, "All right, stop being so pretentious. You're so sleepy. Go to sleep." Pretentious? A certain someone, He Xingjio, fell asleep very soon. Di Biming's body was weak now, so he fell asleep in a daze. The next day, He Xingjio opened her eyes and kissed Di Biming. Di Biming hesitated but did not dodge. He Xingjio struggled for a long time, but she could not draw out the thing in Di Biming's body. She could only give up and mutter, "Forget it, Mrs. Hungry. Let's continue after you are full." After Yun Chujio finished speaking, she clearly felt a chill coming from her side. However, this guy was already immune to it. He climbed out of the bed and washed up as if nothing had happened. A certain Jio clenched her fists by her side. Her cold eyes looked deeply at the certain Jio who was washing her face. After a long while, she got out of bed and washed up. After washing up, when the certain Jio was about to eat the fasting pill, He Xingjio stuffed a pair of chopsticks into his hands. "If you want the cold poison to heal faster, eat well." The certain Jio did not refuse and ate breakfast with Yun Chujio. Feeling the warmth in his stomach, a thought arose in his mind. It seemed that eating these dishes was indeed more comfortable than fasting pills, although it was a waste of time. After breakfast, Di Biming forced He Xingjio to cultivate with him. A certain Jio was almost driven mad by the two little ones staying in the inn for the next 2 days. "Prince Charming, let's go out for a walk. If we continue to hold it in, I will turn into a mushroom," He Xingjio said as she looked at the lively street through the window. A certain someone didn't say anything, obviously not intending to go out. "Prince Charming, how are we going to get information if we don't go out? If the news is not so strong, we can go out of the city." A certain someone said indifferently, "What's the point of going out of the city? Stay in this room obediently before the frost poison is cured. You can't go anywhere." He Xingjio pursed her lips. Actually, she also knew that staying in the inn was safer than going anywhere. She said that gathering information was just an excuse. This fellow just wanted to go out for a stroll. Another 2 days passed and everything was peaceful. Under the suppression of Di Biming, He Xingjio also gave up the idea of going out for a stroll. On this day, the two little ones were cultivating in the room when the sound of footsteps came from outside the door. Yun Chujio and Di Biming looked at each other. Both of them were shocked. Who was it? Could it be that it was coming for them? The sound of footsteps stopped at their door. Yun Chujio's heart tightened. Was it really coming for them? At this moment, the door was pushed open. The inn owner said with a smile, "Two little guests, Leader Zhang is here to see you." Yun Chujio saw the people beside the innkeeper and her heart thumped. It was actually the person who had intercepted her and the pretty boy's flying spirit tool. What was he doing here? Could it be that he was suspecting them? Chapter 3465, What was she going to do? Although Yun Chujio was bewildered, she revealed a pleasantly surprised expression on her face and said softly, "Uncle, is there any news about our parents?" Leader Zhang glanced at the two little guys, he sighed and said, "When we were on a mission, we happened to find the remains of a flying spirit tool and some bones that were gnawed by demonic beasts. I'm afraid that your parents are in grave danger." Yun Chujio, Di Biming, Yun Chujio was the first to react. She hugged a certain someone and cried loudly. As she cried, she secretly pinched a certain someone. "Brother, we've become orphans. Sob, brother, we don't have a home anymore." A certain someone did not know what crying was. Even if Yun Chujio pinched him until he was in pain, he only lowered his eyes. There was still no sadness on his face. However, in the eyes of Leader Zhang and the others, the appearance of a certain deity was automatically imagined by them. This child was probably still unable to accept the fact that his parents had passed away for a short period of time. That was why he had a blank look on his face. Leader Zhang sighed in his heart. He originally did not like to meddle in other people's business. However, when he saw the remains of the flying spirit tool, he remembered what Little Nine said about him being a good person. Therefore, after he returned, he sent someone to find the place where the siblings were staying. After coming over for a while, Leader Zhang saw that Little Nine had calmed down a little. Then he asked, "Although your parents have passed away, there must be other relatives in the family. Where is your home? I'll send someone to send you back." Hei Xinjiu pursed her lips. "Father and mother have passed away, so we don't have a home anymore. Sob, we have nowhere to go." Leader Zhang frowned. No home? Could it be that something had happened to their family in the first place, which was why their parents had taken them away? Then, the person who had tried to kill them might not be a rogue cultivator, but a fight within the family. Leader Zhang imagined a fierce and cruel civil war in the family, and he looked at the two little ones with even more pity in his eyes. He said, "Since you have nowhere else to go, there is a child welfare bureau for orphans in the city. Why don't you go there? Staying in an inn is not a long-term solution." Hei Xinjiu thought to herself that she would not go to the child welfare bureau, but she could not reject it openly. The guy cried and said, "No, we will wait for father and mother here. They will definitely come to us. They will not die." Leader Zhang tried to persuade them again. Seeing that Yun Chujio was crying and refusing to go, he had to give up. "Forget it. Since you are not willing to go, I will not force you. You can stay here for now. I will come and visit you in a few days." Hei Xinjiu said a few words of gratitude softly before Leader Zhang left with his men. Yun Chujio saw that everyone had left through the crack of the door and heaved a sigh of relief. She thought that she had been exposed and was scared to death. However, with the visit of Leader Zhang, their identities had been confirmed. At least, it would not arouse the suspicion of the inn owner. Just when Hei Xinjiu thought that everything was calm, Leader Zhang came to the inn again on this day with many soldiers. "Children above the age of 5 and below the age of 10, immediately follow me to the divine hall. No mistakes are allowed," Leader Zhang said loudly. Yun Chujio's heart was like a mutt. What kind of trouble was this? Although the two little ones were not in love, they could only follow the children of other guests and be taken out of the inn. Yun Chujio moved to Leader Zhang's side and sweetly asked, "Uncle, where are you taking us?" Leader Zhang's face was slightly smug as he said, "The hateful palace wants to recruit inner palace disciples. Inner palace disciples are different from ordinary hateful palace disciples. Inner palace disciples are nurtured by the hateful palace from a young age, and their status is higher than other disciples. Inner palace disciples are only recruited once every 5 years. This is a once-in-lifetime opportunity. Originally, you didn't have parents, so you were unable to provide proof of identity. Logically speaking, you don't have the qualifications to participate in the selection. However, with this commander vouching for you, you don't have to worry about this problem." After saying this, Leader Zhang looked at Little Nine with a face full of anticipation. His meaning was obvious. "Quickly thank me. Quickly praise me." Yun Chujio's heart was like a beeping dog. Who the fuck wanted to participate in some inner palace disciple selection? However, when she saw the excited faces of the children around her and the ecstatic expressions of their parents, she could only swallow her words of reluctance. In the hearts of everyone, the Lihen Palace was supreme. It was a place like a fairyland. If she rejected it, it would definitely arouse the suspicion of others. Moreover, she was only going to register. When the time came, she would just have to think of a way to make her and the gigolo lose. Thinking of this, Hei Xinjiu's face was filled with gratitude. "Uncle, thank you so much. You're really a good person." When Leader Zhang heard Little Nine's praise, he was very gratified. This was a piece of cake for him, but it could change the lives of these two children. He felt that he was great. Of course, Leader Zhang also felt that although these two children were young, their aptitude seemed to be quite good. Moreover, they were intelligent and quick-witted. If they were chosen by the Lihate Palace, they might be able to borrow some strength in the future. Heavens, if he could connect with the Lihate Palace's inner sect, then his future would be limitless. Leader Zhang then brought people to other inns in the city to gather children of the right age. Finally, he brought them all to the divine hall of the Juntiantian kingdom. By the time Yun Chujio and the others arrived, many children had already gathered in the square of the divine hall. They were presumably children of noble families and ordinary people. The children were chattering excitedly. Clearly, they all felt that this was a good opportunity to soar to the sky. At this moment, Emperor Xian Huan and the imperial preceptor of the Juntiantian kingdom walked over. The square instantly fell silent. Emperor Xian Huan first said some polite words, nothing more than expressing his loyalty to the Lihate Palace. Now he could be said to be trembling with fear. The people of the Lihan Palace had met with trouble in his territory, and they had searched for so many days without finding anything. He was afraid that the Lihan Palace would vent their anger on him, so he was even more cautious. After Emperor Xian Huan finished speaking, the imperial tutor of the June Heaven Kingdom said, "The criteria for the Lihan Palace to select people are very strict. It is naturally impossible for all of you to have the qualifications to go to the Lihan Palace to participate in the selection. Now I will carry out the preliminary selection first. Those who are eliminated can go back." Yun Chujio blinked her eyes. Preliminary selection? Since there was a preliminary selection, it would be easy to handle. She would see how the children who were eliminated looked like. She would just learn from them. In any case, she could not participate in the selection no matter what. Yun Chujio was afraid that a certain someone would not cooperate, so she forcefully shook his hand. A certain someone's clear and cold eyes glanced at her and nodded indiscernibly. When Yun Chujio saw that a certain someone was so cooperative, her eyes immediately curved into a crescent moon. When a certain someone saw Yun Chujio's appearance, although his expression did not change, his tightly pursed lips curled up slightly. Yun Chujio's calculations were quite good, but she had not expected that the method of the Imperial Preceptor's primary selection would actually be judging a person by their appearance. Although Yun Chujio and Di Baiming had already taken the transfiguration pill, their looks were still very outstanding among these children, so they had passed the primary selection just like that. He Xinjia's heart was like a dog that was bawling. This was also possible? Could it be that the first requirement to become a disciple of the Lihate Palace was to be good-looking? Appearance alone eliminated nearly half of the children, and then the Imperial Preceptor eliminated the children with low spiritual power. As a result, there were less than 50 children left in the square. The Imperial Preceptor looked at the remaining children and pondered for a moment before saying, "Introduce yourselves one by one, and tell me the reason why you want to enter the Lihate Palace. Only 20 of you will be able to enter the next round of the selection." Hearing the Imperial Tutor's question, Yun Chujio was immediately assured. This was easy. In a while, her answer would guarantee that she would not be selected. The children answered one by one. As for why they wanted to enter the Lihan Palace, it was simply because they wanted to be loyal to the Lihan Palace master and wanted to become stronger. He Xinjiao and Di Baiming were ranked last. Therefore it was He Xinjia's turn. After quite a while, He Xinjiao sniffled and cried, "Wu, my name is Xiao Bao and my brother is De Bao. Our father and mother were killed by someone." Wu, Leader Zhang, who was standing aside, gritted his teeth in anxiety. This little girl was usually very smart. Why was she crying now? It was over. He was definitely not going to be chosen. The state preceptor's expression did not change much. He looked at Di Baiming, who was standing beside Yun Chujio, and said, "It's your turn. Go ahead." Di Baiming lowered his head. Even if he was beaten to death, he did not want to say his stupid name like De Bao. Therefore he said 5 words stiffly, "He'll listen to my sister." When Leader Zhang heard that, he was instantly discouraged. These 2 little dolls were definitely going to be eliminated. It seemed that they did not have a rich and noble life. When the state preceptor saw that all the children had finished answering, he began to distribute the jade tokens in his hands. The children who received the jade tokens would mean that they had passed the selection. Therefore he looked at the state preceptor with eager eyes. He Xinjiao knew that she and Di Baiming could not be selected at all, so she did not even bother to look at the national master. She thought to herself that since she had already left the inn today, she could go to the restaurant and have a big meal. If the pretty boy did not agree, she would cry for him to see. Just when she was feeling happy, she heard the national master's voice from above her head. "Take this. This is your jade token." Yun Chujio looked up in confusion, only to see that the imperial tutor still had 2 jade tokens left in his hands, which were obviously hers and Di Baiming's. This guy's heart was as mad as a dog. Fuck. She was crying like an idiot just now and she was actually chosen? Was this imperial tutor blind? Seeing her in a daze, the imperial tutor thought that this little girl was happy silly, so he stuffed the jade token to her, and then handed the remaining jade token to Di Baiming. A certain figure was also in a daze, but he was obviously calmer than He Xinjiao. He took the jade token indifferently. The imperial preceptor asked the servants to take the children who had been eliminated out. A few children gathered their courage and questioned, Imperial Preceptor, that little treasure was crying. That Dabao only managed to squeeze out 5 words. They didn't even give a reason to join the Lihen Palace. Why were they chosen? Hei Xinjiu secretly agreed when she heard this. What a good question. That's right. Why were they chosen? They didn't want to be chosen at all right? The National Master glanced at the children who had been eliminated and said in a calm tone, because what they said was the truth, the truest thought in their hearts. Their parents were killed by a rapist, so they have enough motivation to cultivate properly. Moreover, the brotherly and sisterly love is quite rare. Yun Chujio, there was something that she did not know whether to say or not. Which fucking eye of yours could tell that they were speaking the truth? When those children heard the Imperial Preceptor's words, they were instantly rendered speechless and brought out dejectedly. Leader Zhang, on the other hand, was very happy. He did not expect that the 2 children had actually passed the selection by accident. Although there were still many rounds of selection to come, these 2 children had survived a great disaster and would definitely have good fortune in the future. Perhaps they would really be chosen. Just as Leader Zhang was thinking about it, the Imperial Preceptor said to him, Leader Zhang, escort these children to the Lihen Palace. Don't let anything happen to them. Leader Zhang respectfully acknowledged and then brought the 20 children out of the Divine Hall. Yun Chujio was calculating in her heart. It was said that the Jun Tiantian kingdom was hundreds of thousands of miles away from the Lihen Palace. She could just find an excuse to escape on the way and use this opportunity to escape. When this fellow thought of this, his mood immediately became much better. He even walked briskly. Di Biming keenly sensed the change in Hei Xinjia's mood and frowned slightly. However, he quickly guessed Yun Chujio's thoughts. He also felt that this was a good opportunity to escape, so his slightly furrowed brows also relaxed. However, when he and Hei Xinjiu saw the thousands of soldiers outside the city gates, their hearts instantly turned cold. They had only escorted 20 children, yet they had already sent so many soldiers? How could they have known that Emperor Shen Huan was treading on thin ice? Afraid of any mishaps, they had sent heavy soldiers to escort him. Hei Xinjia's head immediately drooped. Was over. It was impossible for them to escape now. With so many pairs of eyes staring at them, even if she and the pretty boy grew wings, they would not be able to escape. Everyone boarded their flying spirit tools and sped in the direction of Lihen Palace. The children were initially a little reserved, but they quickly became familiar with each other. They were even faintly divided into 3 factions. One of them was a noble child, led by the 9th Prince Shen Yuanzhua, while the other faction was a commoner child. A little boy named Deng Chenyuan was the leader. As for Hei Xinjiu and Di Biming, they were pushed aside and became the 3rd faction. Both sides had tried to get the 2 of them to join, but Hei Xinjiu had arrogantly rejected them. As a result, the 2 of them became the 3rd faction with honor. Because of Leader Zhang's care for the 2 of them, although those children isolated Hei Xinjiu and a certain respected figure, they did not dare to openly bully the 2 of them. Yun Chujio was not a child. She scoffed at such childish behavior. If she had the time, she would rather tease her gigolo. After walking for about half a day, the flying spirit tool landed on the ground. Hei Xinjiu could not help but wonder, why did it land so suddenly? What happened? After a while, more children boarded the flying spirit tool. Yun Chujio listened to a few words and immediately understood. These children were selected from the other cities of the Jun Tiantian kingdom. That's right, it was impossible to only choose from the capital city. The children from other cities naturally had to participate in the election. However, the number of children chosen from other cities was obviously less than the number chosen from the capital city. This was understandable. The people with high spiritual power in the Jun Tiantian kingdom were basically all gathered in the capital city. There were constantly new children joining. When they left the Jun Tiantian kingdom, the number of children had already risen from 20 to 100. The children quickly joined Shen Yuanzhua and Deng Qianyuan's camp. Only Hei Xinjiu and Di Biming were still leisurely wandering outside. Hei Xinjiu tried several times to escape when the flying spiritual device landed, but she failed. Fortunately, she was smart enough to not be discovered by others. This guy could only say to a certain god in a low voice, "Prince Charming, it seems that we can only hope that we will be eliminated or wait for you to recover your spiritual power." Compared to Hei Xinjiu, Di Biming was much calmer. He lightly said, "N." Yun Chujio, after Hei Xinjiu had thought things through, she immediately let go of herself. Every day she would either eat, sleep, or touch a certain someone. A certain someone had tried to stop her a few times but to no avail, so she couldn't be bothered with her. After all, she was only touching her small hands, touching her face and secretly kissing him a few times. That was all. A few days later, the flying spirit tool landed again. Hei Shinjio thought that she had arrived at the Li-Hate Palace, but who would have thought that after disembarking from the flying spirit tool, she would discover that there was a huge courtyard not far away. Could this be the Li-Hate Palace? Wasn't this a little too rustic? Just as Hei Shinjio was thinking about this, Leader Zhang had everyone stand in a row and brought them to the entrance of the courtyard. Yun Chujio then saw a plaque on the door with 4 big words written on it. Academy Selection. Academy Selection? What the hell was this? Could it be that in order to select the so-called inner court disciples, they had to go to school first before they could select a suitable candidate? Was he crazy? Leader Zhang took the token given to him by the national master and handed it to the guard at the door. One of the guards took the token and walked in. A moment later, a middle-aged man walked out from inside. His attitude was not bad, but one could see that he had a faintly superior attitude. Leader Zhang naturally did not dare to have any objections. After giving some instructions, he left with his men. Before leaving, Leader Zhang looked at Hei Shinjio and Di Biming with encouragement. His intention was self-evident. Naturally, he hoped that they could be selected in the end. Hei Xinjia's feelings toward Leader Zhang were complicated. In short, it was just one sentence. Fuck, good intentions do bad things. The middle-aged man glanced at the children and said coldly, "From now on, your performance will determine whether you will be selected or not. Therefore, if anyone is eliminated, don't blame me for not reminding him." Yun Chujio was delighted. If that was the case, that would be great. She was looking forward to being eliminated. It would be great if she could just cause some trouble. Therefore, the other children all lined up and walked inside obediently. Only Hei Shinjio was jumping around and teasing Di Biming behind her from time to time. This guy silently shouted in his heart, "Eliminate me! Eliminate me! Come and eliminate me quickly!" Unfortunately, the middle-aged man only glanced at the two of them and did not say anything. Hei Shinjio felt stifled. Was this person blind? Why didn't he eliminate her and the gigolo? After entering the courtyard, Yun Chujio realized that the courtyard looked bigger than the outside. There were many courtyards inside, and after a few twists and turns, they were brought to a very large courtyard. There were 3 words written on the door of the courtyard: the Juntian Courtyard. As the name implied, this courtyard was probably prepared for the children of the Juntian Kingdom. These few days, all of you will be living and studying in the Juntian Academy. In the end, only 10 of you will be left behind. Just now, number 19 Little Treasure and number 20 De Bao were playing around, and each of you will be deducted 1 point. Each of you will start with 100 points. If the points are deducted completely, you will be directly eliminated, the middle-aged man said coldly. Yun Chujio cursed in her heart. Fuck, only 1 point was deducted? You should deduct more points. Hei Shinjio pondered in her heart. She had to work harder and cause more trouble. Naturally, the points would be deducted quickly. This way, she and the gigolo could be sent back to the Juntian Kingdom. The middle-aged man continued, "I'm the chief instructor of the Juntian Academy. You can call me Instructor Lu Jiaoshi. There will be other instructors to teach you the lessons you need to learn. Now the men and women will stand separately. I want to assign you a dormitory." The children stood in 2 rows obediently. Only Hei Shinjio stood foolishly in the boys' row. Her fingers were still clutching Di Biming's clothes, as if she would not let go of him. Instructor Lu Jiaoshi frowned. "Number 19, what's wrong with you? Didn't you hear what this instructor said? Quickly stand on the girl's side." Hei Shinjio sobbed. I just want to be with my brother. We siblings will never be separated." Instructor Lu Jiaoxi's frown deepened. The children who were selected had gone through preliminary selection. How could such a noisy little girl be chosen? Hei Shinjio saw Instructor Lu Jiaoxi's gloomy expression and shouted in her heart, "Deduct points. Deduct points." It was best to deduct 100 points all at once. Instructor Lu said coldly, "Deduct 1 more point on the 19th. Now go to the girls' team immediately or continue to deduct points." Hei Shinjio acted as if she did not hear him and hugged Di Biming's waist tightly. "I don't care. I want separate from my brother anyway." Di Biming was secretly pinched by Hei Shinjio, so he could only agree stiffly, "We siblings will not separate." The rest of the children gloated at the 2 of them. These 2 were really courting death. Even if they were not eliminated this time, they would still lose a lot of points. After a moment, Instructor Lu Jiaoshi said coldly, 10 points will be deducted for each of the 19th and 20th. After Instructor Lu Jiaoshi finished speaking, he did not force Yun Chujio to go to the girl's side. Instead, he began to allocate the dormitories. He calculated in his heart that the little girl would soon realize how inconvenient it was to be with a boy. Moreover, she was now a deviant, so the siblings would definitely be ostracized. When that time came, she would naturally give in. 10 people shared a dormitory. In Yun Chujio's dormitory, other than the siblings, the remaining 8 people were all boys. Coincidentally, all 8 of them were Shen Yuanzuo's group. The 8 of them exchanged glances. They had long disliked these 2 little ones. Previously, with Leader Zhang's protection, they were unable to teach them a lesson. Now that there was finally an opportunity, they would be taught a lesson. Instructor Lu Jiaoshi said some things to take note of, and then let the children return to their respective rooms. Yun Chujio dragged Di Biming and stayed in the courtyard for a while before entering the dormitory at a leisurely pace. The 8 people in the dormitory each occupied a bed, and the 2 beds at the entrance were piled with sundries. It was obvious that they wanted to make things difficult for He Xinjiu and Di Biming. One of the fatties said arrogantly, "Hey, you 2 will be responsible for serving us from now on. The water for washing our faces and feet is all your business. As for the place to sleep, just sleep on the floor. In this way you and your sister will not be separated, ha." Pan de N0, VE1. The other 7 boys also laughed strangely. They were generally 2 years older than He Xinjiu, so they did not put the 2 little ones in their eyes at all. Di Biming's little face was expressionless, and it was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. He Xinjiu, on the other hand, began to giggle. She did not want to bully the little ones with the big ones, but since these brats were looking for death, she could not be blamed. Just use them to deduct points and get eliminated early. When the boys saw Yun Chujio smiling happily, they could not help but look at each other suspiciously. Could this little girl be a fool? Pan de N0, VE1. The little fatty curled his lips. Don't tell me you didn't understand what I just said? What are you smiling about? Yun Chujio smiled and took a few steps forward until she was in front of the little fatty. Then she raised her little arm and jumped up to slap the little fatty twice. Although the little fatty had become smaller, his spiritual power had not decreased. Although he had only used less than 10% of his strength, he had still slapped the little fatty several times. The little fatty's face instantly swelled up like a pig's head. The little fatty was a little confused at the beginning. After he reacted, he scolded angrily, "Stupid girl, you dare to hit me?" Yun Chujio curled her lips. "I just hit you. Do you still want to fight back? Let me tell you, if you hit me you will lose points. Anyway, I have already lost so many points. I don't care. Come on, hit me." The little fatty's raised hand suddenly stopped. Although he did not know the rules of the June Heaven Academy, he would definitely lose points in a fight. He could not ruin his future just because of a moment of anger. Seeing that the little fatty did not dare to fight back, Yun Chujio immediately took out a whip from her storage ring and swung it on the ground a few times. She said arrogantly, "Hurry up and empty the 2 beds in the innermost part, or I will not be polite. If anyone is not convinced, come and fight me." The 8 boys stared with their mouths agape at the little girl who was holding the whip. She was obviously not as tall as them, but she made them feel that this little thing was very scary. The boys who originally occupied the 2 beds looked at each other and gritted their teeth to vacate the beds. They thought to themselves that they would tell Instructor Lu Jiaoshi about this little treasure bullying them the next day. At that time they might even kick her out directly. Seeing that they had freed up the beds, Yun Chujio walked in with her short legs and held a certain someone's hand. This guy pointed at the boys with his whip and scolded, "Are you pigs? Don't you know how to clean up? Hurry up and clean up the house. Whoever is lazy, let's fight one-on-one." The boys looked at each other but no one moved. They thought to themselves, this little girl was just saying that. Did she really dare to be enemies with all of them? They were clearly too naive. Seeing that no one moved, He Xinjiu raised her whip and lashed it at the boy closest to her. That little boy could not avoid He Xinjiu's whip, and he was lashed until he cried out in pain. When the other children saw this, they immediately became terrified. One by one they quickly began to clean up. They all had one hope in their hearts, and that was to tell Instructor Lu Jiaoshi about this little girl's crimes the next day. By then they would be free from the sea of bitterness. The children finally finished cleaning up, and Hei Xinjiu occupied the only table in the room. Then she held the whip and said to the children, "I'm hungry. Take out the delicious food that you brought. If anyone doesn't know what's good for them, I'll whip them." The corner of a certain respected figure's eye twitched violently. Stealing the children's food, could you be any more shameless? Those children looked at the whip in Yun Chujia's hand and weighed the bright future of joining the Li Hate Palace. They could only reluctantly take out some food and pass it to Hei Xinjiu. Hei Xinjiu immediately beamed as she called Di Biming for dinner. This fellow was delighted. Tomorrow these naughty children would go and complain, and then she and the gigolo would be kicked out. This was great. After dinner, the children went to bed to rest. If it weren't for Yun Chujiu, this little devil with a black heart, they would definitely play around and rest. Now they were afraid that Yun Chujiu would find fault with them, so they were all very well behaved. Yun Chujiu blinked her eyes and did not return to her own bed. Instead, she climbed onto Di Biming's bed with both hands and feet. Di Biming was too lazy to say anything because it would be useless to say anything. He allowed Hei Xinjiu to reach out her evil claws and hug him. Hei Xinjiu ravished a certain someone for a while. This guy leaned into the ear of a certain someone and whispered, "Prince Charming, do you like this kind of childhood sweetheart tone?" Di Biming's cold little face suddenly turned red. He scolded coldly, "Go to sleep. If you talk again, go back to your own bed." Yun Chujiu curled her lips and pinched a certain someone's arm. Only then did she yawn and fall asleep soundly. A certain someone covered the blanket that Yun Chujiu had kicked away. In the darkness, he pondered for a long time before closing his eyes. The next day before dawn, all the children in the room had already woken up. Especially the little fatty with a swollen face and the boy who had been whipped by Yun Chujiu. They had finished washing up early. They wished that they could see Instructor Lu Jiaoshi right away. They would expose Yun Chujia's evil deeds and then chase her out. Yun Chujiu was awakened by the noise of the children. This fellow's anger from waking up immediately erupted. He said fiercely, "All of you shut the fuck up. If anyone disturbs my sleep, I'll kill him." Those children were stunned at first, and then they were furious beyond belief. This little girl was really too overbearing. However, her good days were about to come to an end. They only needed to endure for a little longer, and perseverance was victory. Finally, the sound of assembly came from outside. The children rushed out impatiently. Only Hei Xinjiu was still lying lazily on the bed. If she was late, she would be deducted points, right? If that was the case, then she would be late. This guy blinked his eyes, hugged Di Biming's neck and said slyly, "We haven't treated you for a long time. Come, little sister will treat you. Be good." While Di Biming was in a daze, Yun Chujia's lips had already kissed him. He might as well just leave it at that. What if it was effective against the cold poison, right? At this moment outside the house, the children had already lined up. Instructor Lu Jiaoshi glanced at the group and noticed that one group was missing 2 people. He could not help but frown. "Group 4, why are there 2 people missing?" When the little fatty heard Instructor Lu Jiaoxi's question, he immediately found his backbone. With a sobbing voice he said, "Instructor Lu Jiaoshi, the ones who are missing are De Bao and Xiao Bao. That Xiao Bao beat me up for no reason last night and now he is late for bed. You have to make a decision for me." The boy who was whipped by Yun Chujiu also stood up and echoed, "Instructor Lu Jiaoshi, that Xiao Bao even beat me with a whip. My back is still burning." Instructor Lu Jiaoshi had actually seen the little fatty's strange behavior just now, but he definitely did not expect that he was actually beaten by that little treasure. That little treasure was 2 to 3 years younger than the little fatty. How did she do it? She probably joined hands with that big treasure? Instructor Lu Jiaoshi was really a little surprised. He originally thought that big treasure and little treasure would be ostracized and bullied by the other children, but he did not expect that she would instead bully others. Instructor Lu Jiaoshi looked at a guard standing at the side of the team and said, "Bring the 2 of them out." When the children of Group 4 saw Instructor Lu Jiaoxi's cold expression, they could not help but gloat. De Bao and Xiao Bao would definitely be eliminated. Even if they were not eliminated, they would still lose a lot of points. This was karma. The guard had just walked to the door of Yun Chujia's dormitory when the door was pushed open. Hei Xinjiu yawned as she held Di Biming's hand and walked out. The 2 of them leisurely stood at the end of the 4th group as if nothing had happened. Instructor Lu Jiaoshi glanced at the 2 of them and said, "Those who are late on the 19th and 20th will be deducted 1 point each." Let's start eating breakfast now. When the little fatty saw that Instructor Lu did not mention the fact that Yun Chujio had beaten him up, he could not help but become anxious. Instructor Lu Xiaobao beat me up. You have to help me make a decision. The boy who had been whipped also looked at Instructor Lu eagerly. Could it be that this Instructor Lu Jiaoshi had a bad memory? How could he forget in such a short time? Instructor Lu glanced at the two of them and then said coldly, as long as no human lives are lost, you can do whatever you want. The little fatty was immediately stunned. The other children were also stunned by Instructor Lu Jiaxi's words. As long as no human lives were lost, they could do whatever they wanted? Did this mean that they were being encouraged to prey on the weak and suppress their competitors so that they could win in the end? The one who was the most confused was naturally He Xinjiu. How could she play with them like this? She was too fucking perverted. Very quickly the children came to their senses. Then they looked at Yun Chujio and Di Biming with malicious intentions. These two little things were undoubtedly the weakest. Moreover, they did not belong to one of the two factions. It was a piece of cake for them to deal with them. The little fatty and the others revealed a smug smile on their faces. They would have a good time tonight. They had to return all the humiliation they had suffered yesterday to them. After breakfast, the children gathered again. At this moment, a middle-aged man came in from outside the courtyard. He first greeted Instructor Lu Jiaoshi and then said to the crowd, I am Instructor Yuan. Now, I will teach you a set of sword techniques to test your comprehension abilities. After Instructor Yuan finished speaking, he summoned a treasured sword and demonstrated the sword techniques he wanted to teach them. The children originally thought that Instructor Yuan would disassemble the sword techniques one by one to teach them, but unexpectedly Instructor Yuan said, the test will be held tomorrow morning. After Instructor Yuan finished speaking, he directly left the courtyard with Instructor Deng. The children were instantly dumbfounded. They had been so engrossed in watching the show just now that they didn't pay much attention to what was going on with each move. Moreover, even if they watched it seriously, they wouldn't be able to remember it even if they watched it once. The children were all frowning. On the first day they had already given them a show of strength. They could foresee that the assessment in the future would be more and more stringent. He Xinjiu curled her lips and directly pulled Di Biming back to the dormitory. She could not be bothered with the bullshit sword technique. Tomorrow during the assessment she would just randomly dance a few times. The other children were not as big-hearted as her. When they gathered together they would recall and discuss one move after another. When everyone's moves were combined, although there were still some differences, it was still much better than 1.5 moves that one person could only remember. In the evening the children returned to their dorms. The children from Group 4 looked at each other. Today was a great opportunity for revenge. They would teach those two little things a lesson later. The little fatty looked at He Xinjiu who was sitting on the chair and eating a fruit. He said fiercely, "Stupid girl, you hit me yesterday. I didn't fight back because I was afraid of losing points." Before the little fatty could finish his words, Yun Chujio threw the fruit core in her hand at his face. "If you want to fight, then fight. What are you talking about?" Yun Chujio had thrown out quite a powerful fruit nucleus. The little fatty's already swollen face was hit by it, and he immediately cried out in pain. The rest of the children were clearly shocked by Yun Chujio's valiant behavior. They had thought that the little girl would definitely be trembling in fear. After all, she had no advantage in any aspect. Who would have thought that she was even more arrogant than before? What right did she have? The children came back to their senses and started to encourage the little fatty. "Ludali, what are you still standing there for? Come on. Are you afraid of this little girl?" The little fatty instantly pounced on He Xinjiu in a fluster. He was gnashing his teeth in hatred. He was a little tyrant in his family, but now he had been bullied by a little girl several times. If she wasn't beaten to half-life today, her name wouldn't be Lu Dali. Yun Chujio wouldn't put a little brat in her eyes. The little fatty's actions were like slow motion in her eyes, and she could easily see the flaws in it. She only dodged slightly and avoided the little fatty's attack. Stretching out her short legs, the little fatty sadly lay on the ground. The little fatty's mind went blank for a moment. Who was he? Where was he? What was he doing? Pandian 0ve1cm. He was actually beaten down by a little guy in one move. He was also a person who cared about his face. How could he survive in the future? Yun Chujio kicked the little fatty. "Hey, aren't you going to fight? Get up." The little fatty got up with a red face and rushed towards He Xinjiu again. However, the outcome was still the same. He didn't even see how the little girl moved before he fell to the ground again. Are you satisfied? Come again if you're not satisfied. It just so happens that the baby had a little too much to eat for dinner, Shinjio said with a smile. The little fatty did not give up. He got up again and rushed towards Shinjio. Unfortunately, some things could not be achieved through hard work. After the little fatty was thrown 8 times, he fell to the ground and died. Yun Chujio kicked him with the tip of her foot. Hey, get up. Let's continue fighting. The little fatty did not say a word. Fuck, he only wanted to die first. He was too ashamed to face anyone. Yun Chujio saw that the little fatty was pretending to be dead, so she did not continue to beat him. Instead, she looked at the other children. Those children were all silent in fear. They were not stupid. If the little fatty fell once or twice, it would be a coincidence. Fuck, he fell 8 times. What did this mean? It meant that this little girl was more powerful than them. Not to mention a one-on-one fight, even if they fought together, they might not be able to win. Moreover, the little girl's brother had not made a move. No matter how one looked at it, that little thing was more powerful than this little girl. Shinjio glanced at them and then said with a smile, I don't eat people. Why are you so afraid? Tell me which one of you still wants to fight the baby one-on-one. Those children shook their heads like rattle drums. What a joke. They did not want to be as miserable as Lu Dali. If they fought with her, they would only be tortured. Seeing this, Yun Chujio took out her whip and swung it on the ground a few times. Then, she said with a smile, it seems that you are convinced now? Those children nodded repeatedly. Even if they were not convinced, they did not dare to say it. Yun Chujio touched her chin and revealed a bright smile on her small face. Since you are convinced, you can call me your king from now on. Do you hear me? The king? What the hell is the king? Just as the children were in a daze, they heard the sound of whips cracking. They immediately stuttered, yes, the king? The corner of the eyes of a certain person with an indifferent expression twitched slightly. Was this little scoundrel addicted to bullying children? Could he still have some integrity? If such a scoundrel had his own children in the future, he would probably be the mother of a child. A certain man's thoughts suddenly stopped and his face turned hot. He quickly crossed his legs to cultivate and stopped paying attention to Shinjio's movements. Shinjio asked the children to stand in 2 rows, then she said with her hands behind her back, come. I'll teach you a song. The title of the song will be The King Sent Me to Patrol the Mountains. This song will be the group song for our 4th group in the future. Do you hear me? The children felt as if their hearts were going crazy. What the hell was this? However, when they looked at the little fatty who was sitting on the ground, and then at the whip in a certain Joe's hand, they immediately nodded without any backbone. Shinjio nodded in satisfaction and began to teach the naughty children how to sing. When the children heard the lyrics, they were even more afraid. What did she mean by catching a monk for dinner? Was this little girl a cannibal? The more the children thought about it, the more scared they became. They forced themselves to sing a happy song with a sense of horror. Shinjio did not care whether they were scared or not. After she had tortured them enough, this guy waved his claws and let them go. Then, he moved closer to a certain lord who was cultivating. He said with a smile, this king is going to bed. My beloved concubine, come with me. Hearing Yun Chujio's words, the children were all dumbfounded. This little pervert even flirted with their own elder brother? A certain someone ignored Shinjio and continued to cultivate as if he had not heard her. Shinjio pursed her lips and did not say anything else. Instead, she climbed into the bed and lay down on her side. Then, she reached out her claws and hugged a certain someone's waist, rubbing her little head against it. A moment later, a helpless look appeared on the face of a certain king. He had no choice but to give up his meditation and lie on the outside of the bed. Shinjio immediately snuggled in the arms of a certain king and said happily, brother, what do you think of me as a king? The certain king was silent for a moment before he spat out 2 words indifferently, childish. Shinjio pouted and said, how is it childish? I have 8 subordinates now. A certain person said coldly, what's the use of 8 useless people? The 8 people, they also wanted to keep their dignity, okay? What did he mean by, what's the use of 8 useless people? It turned out that this Debeo was even more detestable than that little pervert. At least that little pervert had taken them as his subordinates. Shinjio giggled. Brother, they're pretty good. The 8 of them suddenly felt a surge of warmth in their hearts. Although this little pervert was hateful, he was at least stronger than her brother. Just when they were inexplicably moved, they heard Hei Shinjio continue, "Sigh, the main thing is that I don't have any other choice. They'll be a good for nothing and make do with it. The 8 of them, fuck, can we feed our feelings to the dogs?" The next morning the children washed up and left the dormitory one after another. The eyes of the other children in the dormitory flashed with schadenfreude. They felt that the 2 little things would definitely be beaten up badly. Therefore all the children's gazes fell on the door of the 4th group's dormitory. Under everyone's gaze, with a creak, the door opened. Chapter 3476 made a few random gestures. Everyone was shocked to discover that the first person to come out was actually that little girl. She had her hands behind her back and was leisurely. There were no signs of being beaten at all. Immediately after, that little girl's elder brother walked out with an indifferent expression, followed by those 8 people. Each and every one of them was extremely well behaved. What was going on? Were they stupid? They had such a good opportunity last night, but they actually didn't take care of these 2 little things? During breakfast, Xian Yuanzhua called the 8 children to the side and asked in puzzlement, "You didn't take revenge last night?" The 8 people looked at each other, and the little fatty said in a low voice, "Ninth Prince, that little girl is very strange. We can't beat her." Xian Yuanzhua, what kind of joke was this? That little girl was only about 5 or 6 years old, but they actually couldn't beat her? A bunch of trash. Xian Yuanzhua was born into the imperial family. Although he was only 9 years old, he was ruthless. He was now on par with Deng Qinyuan, so he had to find something to establish his authority. Only then would he be able to win over the other party's people. The greater his power was, the greater the chance of him staying in the Li Hate Palace in the end. He looked at Hei Shinjio, who was receiving her breakfast, and a trace of ruthlessness appeared in his eyes. He lowered his voice and said, "Tonight, I will bring people to your dormitory. Tonight, no matter what, I will beat up those 2 little things and avenge you." The little fatty's face immediately paled. "Ninth Prince, let's forget about it. They are not in our way. Why must we target them?" He was most likely afraid of being beaten up. He vaguely felt that even if the 9th Prince brought people to help them, they might, most likely 80%, still not be able to defeat that little pervert. Xian Yuanzhua looked at him unhappily. "You're one of my people. Since you've been beaten up, I naturally have to help you vent your anger. There's no need to say more. At night, don't close the door. After the sky turns dark, it'll bring people over." The little fatty saw Xian Yuanzhuo's gloomy expression and didn't dare to say anything. He unintentionally raised his head and saw that the little pervert was holding a bun in his hand. He was looking at Xian Yuanzhuo with a smile that made him shudder. The little fatty instantly felt bad. What was that little pervert smiling about? Could it be that he had guessed what they had said? If he had guessed it, why would she not only not be afraid but also smile? Xian Yuanzhua did not notice the little fatty's strange behavior and directly brought his people over to pick up breakfast. After the children had eaten breakfast, they took advantage of Instructor Yuan's absence and began to demonstrate the sword techniques they had learned the day before. Only Hei Xinjiu and Di Baiming, the 2 little ones, sat leisurely on the small horse carriage and basked in the sun. Of course, a certain lord originally did not want to sit on the small horse carriage, but he could not withstand Hei Xinjia's forceful pull and could only sit on the small horse carriage with a stiff face. When Instructor Yuan came, his gaze couldn't help but linger on the 2 small bodies for a moment, then he asked everyone to gather. After everyone gathered, they began the sword technique assessment in turn. Instructor Yuan's expression didn't show any emotions, nor did he make any comments. He just asked everyone to practice the sword technique in order. After a while it was Hei Xinjia's turn. Hei Xinjio walked to the front, took out a sword from her storage ring, and started to draw randomly. The children sneered one after another. This little treasure would definitely lose points. She was simply drawing randomly. Hei Xinjio drew randomly a few times and then said with a smile, "Instructor Yuan, I didn't understand how you drew yesterday, so I just drew randomly a few times." Instructor Yuan didn't say anything. He asked her to go down and let Di Baiming come forward to practice his swordsmanship. Chapter 3477. Points deducted based on ability. Di Baiming was not as thick-skinned as Yun Chujio. He did not even step out. He only said coldly, "I don't know how." The children were gloating even more. These two little things did not even step out. These two little things will definitely be deducted a lot of points. Based on this rate of deduction, these two little things will be eliminated very soon. Unexpectedly, Instructor Yuan still didn't say anything and let the other children continue practicing their swordsmanship. Finally, everyone finished practicing. Instructor Yuan glanced at everyone and said, "Except for number 19 and number 20, each person will lose 10 points. Everyone, hey Xinjiu, Di Baiming." Immediately someone asked indignantly, "Instructor Yuan, although the way we practiced might be a little different from what you taught us yesterday, De Bao and Xiao Bao were just randomly practicing. Why did we lose points instead?" Instructor Yuan replied coldly, "Knowing is knowing. Not knowing is not knowing. Number 19 and number 20 at least have the courage to admit that they didn't learn the sword technique. They didn't mess it up like you did. A set of sword technique that was perfectly fine was ruined by you." Hei Xinjiu felt as if she was cursing a dog in her heart. Fuck, this works? If she had known this would happen, she would have imitated those devilish children and made a few decent gestures. It wasn't easy for her to use her ability to deduct some points, and in the blink of an eye she had returned to the same starting line. When the children heard Instructor Yuan's words, although they were still indignant, no one said anything. After all, a small arm couldn't twist a thigh, so they could only listen to the instructor's arrangements. The children originally thought that Instructor Yuan would continue to teach them the previous set of sword techniques, but they did not expect that Instructor Yuan would leave without saying anything. Fortunately, the head of the guards at the side said, "You guys have lunch first. There will be a new instructor coming to teach you in the afternoon." Hei Xinjiu ridiculed in her heart. What kind of trick was this? This was considered a test? There was a new instructor in the afternoon? Crazy. In the afternoon there was indeed a new instructor. The new instructor was an old man. This old man was even more lazy. He directly threw a few types of herbs to each group and then left. The crowd did not understand and could only carefully observe the herbs thrown to them, in case they could not pass the test the next day. Yun Chuzhou originally planned to bring Di Baiming back to the dormitory, but the strange grass in her dantian was clamoring to eat those herbs. It was Guaichao. Guaichao was afraid of Di Baiming, so its clamor was restrained a lot. Yun Chuzhou saw that the strange grass was so interested, so she moved closer to the little fatty and the others who were holding the herbs. She stretched out her small claws and said, "Give it to me, let this king see." King. Immediately, everyone looked at the little fatty and the others. The little fatty and the others' faces turned red. They felt the mockery and disdain from the other children, but they did not dare to disobey Yun Chuzhou. They could only hand the herbs to Hei Xinjiu. Hei Xinjiu looked at the herbs, then shamelessly put them into her storage ring. "They'll take them into the house to have a good look. You guys go and look at the herbs from other groups." Fatty and the others were on the verge of tears. Other groups would never lend them the herbs. They were all eager to have a few less competitors. Hei Xinjiu naturally did not care whether Fatty and the others were crying or not. This guy returned to the dormitory and took the few herbs to have a look. He swallowed them all, but he was afraid that he would attract trouble. This guy blinked his eyes and grabbed a few leaves to swallow. Although the Guaichao was not satisfied, he did not dare to cause any more trouble. Chapter 3478. She was digging a hole for them during dinner. Yun Chuzhou returned the missing herb to the little fatty and the others. Although the little fatty realized that some of the leaves were missing, he did not dare to ask too much because his heart was currently in a mess. Shen Yuanzhuo was going to bring people to deal with this little devil at night. Should he inform the others? The little fatty secretly gathered the other 7 people to discuss. The 8 of them did not have the same opinion. Some people felt that it was not bad to be able to borrow Shen Yuanzhuo's hands to deal with those 2 little things. At the very least they would be able to vent their anger. Some people were worried that if Shen Yuanzhuo failed, then their lives would be in deep trouble in the future. After discussing for a long time, they still could not come to a conclusion. At this moment they heard the little pervert in the dormitory call out to them, "Little ones, quickly come in. This king has something to announce." The little fatty and the others looked at each other and could only enter the dormitory nervously. The moment they entered the dormitory, they saw the little pervert sitting on a chair, swinging his 2 short legs and looking at them with a faint smile. Inexplicably, the hearts of the 8 people tightened. Could it be that this little pervert already knew? Yun Chuzhou glanced at the 8 people and said with a smile, This king hates being betrayed the most. Once, a one-eyed wolf raised by this king bit this king. Do you know what happened to that one-eyed wolf? The little fatty and the others felt that Yun Chujia's smile was particularly scary. They subconsciously shook their heads and stuttered, "No, I don't know. It's nothing. It's just that the dinner that day was wolf stew," Yun Chujio said lightly. After Yun Chujio said that, she didn't say anything else. She just used her little meaty claws to slowly and rhythmically knock on the table. Her eyes were cold as she looked at the little fatty and the others. The little fatty and the others immediately understood that Yun Chujio was knocking on their heads. They could not help but break out in cold sweat. They really did not understand why the little thing in front of them would bring them such great fear. The little fatty was the first to be unable to hold on. He said with a trembling voice, Your Majesty, he'll say. The 9th prince is going to bring people over to beat you up tonight. But this has nothing to do with us. He said it himself. We tried to stop him but we did not succeed. The other children also echoed him. Even the children who initially wanted to use Shen Yuanzuo's hand to teach Yun Chujio a lesson had turned against him. They all echoed the little fatty's words, wanting to get rid of themselves. Yun Chujio's little face revealed a trace of a cold smile. You say it quite nicely. Did you really not have any intention of letting Shen Yuanzhua avenge you at that time? A few of the children immediately revealed a panicked and guilty look. Yun Chujio saw the changes in their expressions one by one, then she said indifferently, He'll give you a chance to prove your loyalty to me. As for whether you can seize it or not, it's up to you. The little fatty and the others immediately had a bad premonition in their hearts. They kept feeling that the little thing in front of them was digging a pit for them to jump into. Moreover, it was a bottomless pit. The little fatty asked with a trembling voice, What opportunity? Isn't Shen Yuanzhua going to bring some people over to beat me up later? Let's prepare some gifts for them so that their trip will not be in vain. You guys do this, do you hear me? Yun Chujio told them her idea. The little fatty and the others were so shocked that they almost sat on the ground. If they did as she said, they would have completely offended Shen Yuanzhua. However, if they did not do as she said, this little pervert would not spare them. What should they do? Chapter 3479 Beating people up. Yun Chujio did not urge them. She continued to knock on the table, putting invisible pressure on them. After a while, the little fatty gritted his teeth and said, Your Majesty, I will do as you say. The little fatty had thought it through. If it really did not work out, he would go and seek refuge with Deng Qianyuan. Shen Yuanzhua could not do anything to him. With the little fatty leading the way, the other children also agreed to Yun Chujio's arrangement and began to prepare a big gift for Shen Yuanzhua. When Yun Chujio saw that the little fatty and the others were getting busy, she looked at Di Biming with a smug look on her face. Di Biming curled his lips. This little rascal was able to have fun with a bunch of naughty children. There was really no one else. After about 2 hours, the sound of footsteps came from outside the door. Then the door was kicked open. Shen Yuanzhua brought the 9 people in his group and barged into the dormitory. Shen Yuanzhua had originally planned to work with the little fatty and the others to give that little thing a good beating after barging in. This way, the news of him sticking up for his subordinates would spread, and Deng Qianyuan's people might join him. He had thought it through quite well, but who would have thought that they would be tripped by a few ropes as soon as they charged into the dormitory? Then, their heads would be covered by gunny sacks, and they would be beaten up without any explanation. They did not have the slightest bit of alertness. In addition, it was dark at night and the space in the room was limited, so they were beaten up by the little fatty and the others. At first, the little fatty and the others were a little scared, but later they realized that it did not seem to be a big deal. Since they had already made their move, they did not have any scruples. Moreover, they had been bullied by He Xinjiu for the past 2 days, so they vented their anger on Shen Yuanzhua and the others. In an instant, the 4 groups of dormitories were filled with wails and howls, causing the other dormitories to come over and watch. However, the space in the dormitories was limited, so everyone could only squeeze through the door and look inside. Yun Chujio felt that the beating was almost over, so she asked Fatty and the others to stop. Then, she walked up to Shen Yuanzhua with the whip in her hand and gave him a hard whip. She said, I heard that you want to pretend to be a garlic clove to take care of this king? You really are an idiot. How could my people betray me? Shen Yuanzuo's face was bruised and swollen from the beating. He glared fiercely at Yun Chujio, then used an even colder gaze to look at the little fatty and the others. You actually treat me like this. Just you wait. The little fatty and the others could not help but feel some lingering fear. Shen Yuanzhua was the 9th prince of the Jun Tiantian kingdom. If they were chosen by the Lihate Palace it would be fine. But if they were not chosen, Shen Yuanzhua would definitely take revenge on them and their family clans. Yun Chujio glanced at Fatty and the others, then at Shen Yuanzhua. Who doesn't know how to boast? This king is not someone who is scared. I have already beaten up enough today. Get lost. Shen Yuanzhua coldly glanced at Yun Chujio, Fatty, and the others, then was carried away by a few children. Soon the surrounding children also dispersed. Yun Chujio looked at Fatty and the others and said indifferently, "Close the door. This king has something to say to you." The little Fatty rolled and crawled as he closed the door. With a sobbing tone he said, "Your Majesty, what should we do? If we are not chosen by the Lihate Palace, the 9th prince will definitely take revenge on us." Yun Chujio glanced at him indifferently. She said faintly, "What are you afraid of? The law does not punish the masses. Can't we just make everyone his enemy? Of course there is still a once and for all method. That is to kill him. Which method do you choose?" Chapter 3480 Picking Herbs. The little Fatty and the others were so frightened by He Xinjia's words that they almost sat on the ground. Although they had been cultivating since they were young, they had only killed some demonic beasts at most. How could they have killed anyone? This little pervert wanted to kill Shen Yuanzhua right away. He had scared them to death, all right? After a long while, the little Fatty swallowed his saliva and said with a trembling voice, It's better to choose the first method. However, how can we make everyone his enemy? It's fine with Deng Qianyuan's people. They are not enemies to begin with, but there are still dozens of people who are the 9th prince's followers. How can we make them the 9th prince's enemies? Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes. Can't we just make them my subordinates? When the time comes, let them beat up Shen Yuanzhua and Shen Yuanzhua will naturally hate them. The little Fatty and the others looked at Yun Chujio in a daze. Wasn't this little pervert a little too arrogant? She actually wanted to make those dozens of people her subordinates? How could she do that? Yun Chujio did not answer their questions. Instead she waved her claws. This king is sleepy. Go to sleep. Although the little Fatty and the others were terrified and confused, they did not dare to ask any more questions. They could only return to their beds to rest. The next morning, after the old man, instructor Jing Jiaoshi, arrived, he threw a large basket of medicinal herbs to each group and asked them to pick out the same medicinal herbs that had been given to them the day before. When the children saw the large basket of medicinal herbs that all looked extremely similar, they were instantly dumbfounded. If there was sufficient time, they could carefully compare the medicinal herbs one by one with the samples in their hands. However, they only had half a minute's time. It was simply more difficult than ascending to the heavens to pick out all of them. Especially the little Fatty and the others, who were holding the herbs whose leaves had been plucked. It was even harder to tell which one was the herb they were looking for. He Xinjiu blinked her eyes. Of course, she didn't care if the points would be deducted, but seeing the expressions of the little Fatty and the others who were about to cry, her conscience that had disappeared for a long time finally showed up. She scratched the wicker basket a few times, then took out a few herbs and threw them into the empty wicker basket at the side. She said carelessly, "Hurry up and pick, what are you waiting for? Look at me, I picked so many in such a short time." The little Fatty and the others were about to cry. "Are you picking? It was purely a random grab, how could this work?" Although the few of them wanted to put the random grab Yun Chujio made back into the wicker basket, they thought about the little pervert's whip and gave up on that idea. The few miserable children tried their best to rummage through the wicker basket, hoping to find a few more correct herbs. 15 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. The children looked at the wicker baskets of the other groups at the same time. When they saw that there were dozens of herbs in the fourth group's wicker basket, they could not help but twitch their lips. They must have picked them randomly, it was impossible to have so many correct herbs. When little Fatty and the others saw that the herbs they picked were more than twice the number of other groups, they immediately looked at He Xinjiu with resentment. They were really unlucky. How could they be in the same dormitory as such a little pervert? It was fine if they were bullied, but not only did they completely offend 9th Prince, they would probably lose points again this time. Instructor Deng walked to the wicker basket of each group and inspected it, then brought the wicker basket of the fourth group to the front. The faces of little Fatty and the others instantly turned pale. It was over. They were definitely going to be severely criticized. They were going to lose points. Chapter 3481 Killing people. Seeing this, Xian Yuanzhua revealed a ruthless expression. These people actually dared to help that smelly girl deal with him. As long as they were driven out of this place, he would think of a way to kill them in the future. The other children had gloating expressions on their faces. The fourth group would definitely lose points. The more points they lost, the better. This way their competitors would be much fewer. Jing Jiaoshi glanced at everyone and said, "Except for the fourth group, everyone in the other groups will lose 10 points. Hei Xinjiu was not surprised by this, but she did not expect it to be so ruthless. Lose 10 points directly? Fuck, if she had known this would happen, she would have chosen fewer correct herbs. Immediately someone raised an objection. Jing Jiaoshi, why can't the fourth group lose points? Instructor Jing Jiaoshi said coldly, on what basis? On the basis that the fourth group has found more correct medicinal herbs than you. If you are not convinced, take these medicinal herbs back and pick them slowly. After Instructor Jing said these words, he did not care about the medicinal herbs and directly walked away. Yun Chujio was secretly amazed. Not to mention other things in the hateful palace, these instructors had a very good character. Yun Chujio kept all the herbs she had gathered into her storage ring. These herbs could be used to feed Go Weiba. Little Fatty and the others did not dare to say anything when they saw this. The main thing was that they had not recovered from their shock until now. They had actually gotten first place? The feeling of going from hell to paradise in an instant was simply dizzying. They had not picked out a few in total, and most of the herbs in the bamboo basket had been randomly plucked by their king. Could it be that those herbs were actually correct? The gazes the children used to look at the fourth group had some changes. Right now, the fourth group had the fewest points deducted, so it had clearly become the target of everyone's exclusion. This was especially so for Xian Yuanzhua. The gaze he used to look at Yun Chujio and the others was as if it had been tempered with poison. At this moment, an old man walked in from outside the door. The old man's body had a cold and gloomy aura. The children immediately quieted down and looked at the old man with some fear. The Palace of Hatred never accepts cowards. Today's assessment is very simple, and that is, to kill. The old man said coldly. The children immediately cried out in surprise. What did he mean by this? Was he actually asking them to kill? Yun Chujio cursed in her heart. The Palace of Hatred was indeed not a good place. There was actually such an assessment. It was truly freakish. The old man swept his gaze over everyone, and the children immediately quieted down. The old man clapped his hands and 10 people were escorted in by guards. Those 10 people were all tied up and clearly did not have the slightest ability to resist. The old man coldly said, "If you all want to not lose points, then come forward and kill one of them. As you all have seen, there are only 10 people here, which means that only 10 of you have a chance. Let's begin now." Xian Yuanzuo's eyes revealed a ruthless determination. He had long ago killed a few disobedient servants in the imperial palace, so killing people was simply a piece of cake for him. He walked to the front, drew his treasured sword and cleanly killed a person. Seeing Xian Yuanzuo's ruthlessness, the children couldn't help but cry out in surprise. The faces of the little Fatty and the others were deathly pale. They really didn't dare to imagine how Xian Yuanzhua would deal with them if they couldn't enter the Li Hate Palace. When Deng Qinyuan saw that Xian Yuanzhua had killed a person, he gritted his teeth. If he did not dare to kill a person, his lackeys might seek refuge with Xian Yuanzhua. Thus, he could only bite the bullet and kill a person with his eyes closed. Chapter 3482 followed this king to rob with Xian Yuanzhua and Deng Qinyuan taking the lead. Another 8 slightly older children walked up and killed the remaining 8 people. The old man's expression did not change. He only ordered the guards in charge of recording to deduct 10 points from everyone except Xian Yuanzhua, and then left. After the old man left, many children sat on the ground paralyzed. This was the first time they had seen a killing scene, so it was difficult for them to get used to it. Perhaps to give the children some time to recover, there were no other classes scheduled that day. The head of the guards let the children make their own arrangements. The little Fatty and the others staggered back to the dormitory, their faces full of fear. They were really afraid that Xian Yuanzhua would take revenge on them. Moreover, among the 8 children who had killed, several of them were from the same dormitory as Xian Yuanzhua. They were also the people who had been beaten up by them. Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes. She had planned to play a little trick and take Xian Yuanzuo's lackeys as her own and then isolate Xian Yuanzhua. But now it seemed that Xian Yuanzhua was cruel and merciless. It was best to kill him to avoid future trouble. However, this plan had to be planned more carefully. It was most suitable to kill someone by borrowing someone else's knife. That night, Hei Shinjio waved her little paws and said, "Little ones, let's go and rob with this king." Rob. The little fatty and the others were dumbfounded. What was this little pervert trying to do? Why was he robbing them all of a sudden? Did he think that he had not caused enough trouble? However, they did not dare to disobey her, so they could only follow Hei Shinjio out of the room. A certain someone did not intend to get involved, but when he saw Hei Shinjio leaving with the others, he thought for a moment and decided to follow her. Hei Shinjio kicked open the door of Shen Yuanzuo's dormitory, then whipped the ground a few times and said fiercely, "Hand over all the good stuff on you or else I'll kill all of you." The little fatty and the others were about to cry. This little pervert actually wanted to rob Shen Yuanzhuo and the others? There were quite a few people who had killed people in this room. Wasn't he asking for a beating? Shen Yuanzhuo was first stunned when he saw Yin Chujio and the others. Then he laughed sinisterly. This wretched girl was really asking for death. Since she had delivered herself to his doorstep, then don't blame him for being ruthless. Since there was a rule against killing people, then he would cripple her limbs and dantian. He could use her to establish his authority. Just as Shen Yuanzhuo was thinking about it, he heard the little girl shout, "What are you all standing there for? Attack together." If anyone doesn't attack, I will whip him. Hei Shinjio took the lead and whipped a child who had killed people today. The child was hit by the whip and a bloody scar appeared on his face. He could not help but become angry out of humiliation. He took out a treasured sword and fought with Yin Chujio. "You dare to use a sword? What a bitch. Little ones, he has already used a weapon, what are you waiting for? Use your weapons." Hei Shinjio shouted shamelessly. This guy did not even think about it. She was the one who had used the whip first, but now she was accusing the other party of using a weapon first. While the little fatty and the others were still hesitating, Shen Yuanzuo's followers summoned their weapons and rushed towards them. The dormitory was originally small, and now that they had used their weapons, it was instantly in chaos. Seeing that no one was going to deal with him, and seeing that Yun Chujio and that child were fighting so fiercely, a trace of viciousness flashed through Shen Yuanzuo's eyes. He raised the sword in his hand and stabbed it towards Yun Chujio's back. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.